On microphone. Oh, there I am. All right. Jonathan Nickel is calling. Hello? Hi, are you logging in? Oh, so I had to type in from the agenda. I had to type in the meet.google.com. Go to the agenda. I didn't see a link in your, you know, exactly. Okay. Bye. All right. He had the same question I had. Was there a link to click on? There wasn't, right? You had to.
No, there was.
Where did you find it?
On the agenda page.
You could click on that, or we had to type it in. I had to type it in.
Yeah.
Into the browser.
Good afternoon, everybody. Hi, this is Tom. I'm not sure if you can hear me. If you can, please mute your mics. Susan, I believe Jonathan is still trying to call in. Otherwise, I believe you have all your board members present.
Hey, I'm here. Hello. Can you guys hear me? This is Jonathan.
Yeah, I can hear you, Jonathan.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
This is Dwayne. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, Dwayne, we can hear you.
Yep.
Yeah.
Good.
Yep, Katie's here.
Okay.
Okay. Now I'm on. Dwayne, can you hear us?
I can now. Yeah.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yep. All right. It is 4:04, and I will call our meeting to order. Eliza, will you please call the roll?
Certainly. Katie Frisch,
Present.
Susan Roll,
Here.
Jonathan Nickel,
Here.
Dwayne Romero,
Here.
and Susie Zimmett.
Here.
Thank you.
Can I have a motion to adopt the agenda as presented?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Okay. All right. Can I get Susan Roll,
Aye.
Jonathan Nickel,
Aye.
and Dwayne Romero?
Aye.
Okay. So I believe we have a public comment. Is it just one, Eliza? That
Correct. That's all we had recorded, that there was going to be one public comment.
okay. Kay, are you there? It was Kay, right?
It was correct. Let me shoot her an email.
Eliza, should we go ahead with Dan O'Connell and then we can come back?
Yeah, let's do that. I just shot her an email, so hopefully she'll just jump on. We'll catch her up after that.
Okay. All right. Dan, are you there?
I am. Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
So welcome. We're glad that you could chat with us for a little bit today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me in these odd times we're experiencing, but certainly happy to join.
Great. So do you have any thoughts about our new world? I don't even know how to start this, actually. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, that's okay. I'll kind of give you what I've been talking to most of my districts with. Is, you know, certainly last time we talked and earlier part of this year, in talking to my other clients, most districts were feeling really confident about going to their electorate in 2020. I think I had we had 9 districts that were looking to be on the ballot. Most of them were large metro school districts, and certainly others in the mountain communities with pretty large asks. And obviously that has changed dramatically over the last couple months. And I think, you know, the longer we go into this, I think it makes more of a challenge from a communications perspective. So my general thoughts, just without taking each district into consideration, you know, individually, which certainly you have to do, because each district has their own circumstances. But my general thoughts to all the districts that I've been talking to, and this is kind of what you see in almost any instance, whether it be our business or any other business, is people want to know what to do. What do we do? You know, and it's hard to necessarily pinpoint that advice when we don't really know what the end result will be yet. So right now we're hopefully in the middle, getting close to the peak of this, and then hopefully it'll subside here. But nobody really knows that. And so it's hard to plan into something like that. So I've told most of my districts, if you were planning to go in 2020, rather than just bagging it entirely, although it certainly seems from my perspective right now, there are several that would do so anyhow, maybe wait until mid-May, end of May, see where we're at, and that should still give you enough time from a communications perspective to still pursue something. Now that's just my general advice. What I would say to you guys is you have a bit of a unique situation because you are looking at a step down in debt service where you will otherwise have to lower your mill levy at the end of this calendar year. And should those needs, which I'm sure they won't go away, still need to be addressed in the next few years, you will then have to ask for a mill levy increase at whatever point that will be to address those same needs. Whereas now you can backfill that debt service and you will have still no mill levy increase, and you'll be able to generate these funds of, you know, what we're estimating to be 90 million in par, which should get you just over 100 million in project without a mill levy increase. So by not going this year, you're kind of foregoing that option. So that's a unique position you're in. Nothing else has changed except for this just massive disruption that we've seen in the market. And so that would be my intro comments. I don't think we want to walk through the model again, but certainly happy to do so and just answer any general questions that you guys may have, and then we can get more specific as we go along.
Yeah, so thanks. That's I guess I want to make sure I'm clear about the timing of when our debt retires. Mm-hmm. It's at the end of 2020 or 2021?
So we're looking at a step down in debt service at the end of 2020. You have 7.1 million in debt service, and that goes away. So calendar year, remember, I'm talking calendar year. Yeah. It goes down to 3.5 million. So without doing anything this year, it'll go down, you know, that'll be your debt service next year is 3.5 million.
Okay. Well, yeah, I kind of don't see what we have to lose except, you know, being disappointed.
Right.
I guess.
Well, I have a question just to be clear on the timing again. I mean, there's two issues. There's getting this passed by the voters of whatever amount we want to go for, and then there's actually underwriting the debt. So right. My understanding is the deadline for the voters is typically ballot language is due by like the 3rd or 4th week of August. What is the timing for us to have to actually complete the underwriting?
Yep, that's a good question. So you will have to certify your question. It's usually the first week of September. Most districts, like you said, will try and get something before the board in the end of August. And then approval of the question would then be in November. There are districts that would have to rush into try and be in the market before calendar year, just because they have to take advantage of their current assessed value because of debt capacity issues. You guys wouldn't have to do that. Most of my districts will get the approval in November, and then I'll issue in January or February of the following calendar year. You can levy your levy based upon anticipated debt service from the new money issue. So we would give you a schedule that you would certify your levy in December, expecting to issue in January or February that has estimated debt service in there.
Okay, so is that the kind of drop dead date by the end of February? We would need to get that done?
No, there's no drop dead date. I've had a couple districts that, for just weird reasons, Pooter was one of them, that they had a court challenge that delayed it for 2 years, that if you certify, right, and you're expecting to issue, you are allowed to do that. But if for some reason you were to certify and not issue that year, and then continue to do so thereafter for, let's say, 3 or 4 years, that could be problematic. But I don't think that's what you guys are anticipating doing.
Could you just explain what certifying is? Because I'm new to the bond issue thing. What is that?
Yep. So at the end of, it's usually like December 10 or right thereabouts, you will get a spreadsheet from Linda, and she's going to say, here are the levies that we are certifying. We as the board are certifying, and we're certifying a levy to collect debt. We're certifying a levy to support our general fund. We're certifying a levy for our override revenues. So those are the different levies that we certify, and it's going to amount to your total mill levy for that district, for Aspen School District. And so each year you certify that, and then you turn it into the treasurer or the county, and then they then assess that, and that's how the property taxes are collected.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
Hey, Dan, this is Linda. Could you just talk a little bit about, let's say that assessed values or market values do go down, the timing that school districts see in that decrease of assessed values?
Sure. So it depends oftentimes on what type of assessed value you have. In your case, you guys are, what's your mix? I think you're primarily residential. Let me see if it's in here. Assuming you're primarily residential, which I think you are, residential is assessed every odd year. So this last year it was reassessed, and it'll be reassessed again in 2021. And as you may recall, you had about 10% growth in this last reassessment year. If you're looking at when, like, let's say there's a significant recession and a reduction in property values, it's kind of confusing the way it's assessed, but like we are almost through the reassessment cycle for 2021 going into 22. So it goes up until June of this year, and then they collect the data, and then once they get the data collected, then they decide on the residential assessment rate and do all that work, so that goes in arrears. So what we're experiencing from the last year and a half up until June of this year, we'll see 21 into 22. So I'm even anticipating, even if things were just to go, completely south for the next, whatever that is, 2-3 months, you're still probably going to see a growth in your AV, 21 going into 22. If things really, are ugly, that will show up in the next reassessment cycle, which is 23 into 24. So it's a huge lag. And you guys, Garrett's texting me. He does the model for me here. He says you're 93% residential and commercial. So you don't have to worry about like being heavy into oil and gas because they're assessed every year. So I think from your perspective, you're not going to see a huge dip in AV until probably 23 going into 24, if at all.
Well, that's nice to know.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to budget for, given that it's so many years out. But yeah, it is nice to know.
Yeah. Okay. what about advice on what types of things we would want to be, like, to me, it seems like you might want to change the types of things you say you're going to use the money for. So maybe more teacher housing, or I don't know. Just, do you have any thoughts on that?
I mean, what I've been telling my districts is you need to have a very clear and defined need, because it has to be a need right now. There can be no extras. And so if you had a larger question, you need to maybe look at it with a careful eye now and try and narrow that down a little bit to very specific needs. But when we saw a lot of safety issues, certainly that needs to be addressed. But as far as specifics, I think right now it's more of an economic question than anything else, a pocketbook issue.
Right. Okay.
Susan, can I ask a question? You want to chime in?
Yeah.
So Dan, hey, good to catch up with you. Remember when we were on the fire district, when you were working with us at the Aspen Fire District, remember it was 08?
Yeah. Yeah.
Remember the similar stress, and we ended up hedging a bit on the size. We calculated and got a little conservative on the size of the facility just to anticipate. And obviously we missed. That is to say, we thought it would be maybe a 20% decline in value. We saw more like a 30. But we were still okay because we had taken some of that in consideration when we were, quote unquote, sizing the loan in the facility. With that in mind, standing where we are today, would you advise that we consider taking out perhaps a slightly smaller overall scale with a hedge in mind, and knowing we're just going to have to leave some of it on the table perhaps? What are your thoughts, and what are you advising other districts on?
Yeah, I mean, so the fire district, I'm pretty sure back then, and you'll have to remind me, Dwayne, but they had we certify a mill levy, but it was a fixed mill, so it couldn't fluctuate with whatever property taxes we're doing. So if, let's say it's 2 mills, and if if assessed value goes down dramatically, you can't raise that mill in order to collect more. Whereas a school district, you're asking for an unlimited tax GO pledge. And so, once you get that approval, if assessed value goes down by 30%, you can raise that mill levy up to pay for the debt service on the obligation. And so what I've been talking to my districts about is kind of similar to what I was just saying earlier, is just make sure that need is very specific. And yes, they are dialing it down. Those that are even going, I have several that have just told me flat out they don't think they can go, just where they're at now. So it's either not going at all or dialing it down for sure. I only have a couple districts that are you guys and one other that can do anything without a mill levy increase. And so they're the ones that are still looking at going.
Yeah, so the difference in conditions between now and the fire district, that ability to adjust, were we prohibited at the fire district, or were we asking for a slightly different structure and regime? What was that?
I think, and again, that was a long time ago. So fire districts or special districts oftentimes just set a mill levy, and they ask for that approval, and then they can't adjust it afterward. But that would be my guess.
Yeah, so it's a slightly different animal.
Because I know as then AV went up, that mill levy stays the same, and then you can start build a balance after that. But that's what the fire district did.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, all right. But for what it's worth, Susan, the rest of the board, I mean, I think the fact of where we are with the maturity of that one piece and the ability to kind of step right back into it with a good business plan and a good, rational, supported story to the community about the need for both improvements, but also some expansions and housing and whatnot. I mean, I don't find any reason not to continue on. Obviously, we take a little bit more conservative with the size of the facility, but that's where I'm at. Keep going.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I do too. And in fact, I think it becomes more important in the sense that, we're likely facing operational revenue shortfalls. That, this will hopefully be a way of making up for some of that by, housing, for example, is a benefit that we can't offer on from an operational budget standpoint. But if we can offer that benefit, we still keep the whole package for staff and for teachers. But we're going to have to be careful because we have to be careful where we don't get in a situation, as Dan just talked about, having to increase the mill levy afterwards should you go for too much and the property values go down. So it's going to be a lot of back and forth. I mean, it sounds like this is something we need to address again in May at some point. I'm not sure which meeting. But we do have some time. But if we want ballot language in August, it sounds like May is the time and we need to make the decision about where we go forward. So we might need to do some scenario planning between now and then.
I think
yeah,
so.
I mean, I think, sorry, this is Dan. I apologize if I interrupted, but from a planning perspective and just from a perspective of putting together ballot language, I think that if you're able to get something, May, June, and work on ballot language for approval in August, that should give you more than plenty of time. You notify the county in July. It's usually like July 26th or somewhere about there, of your intent to pursue an election. So I don't think from that perspective there's any issue. I think also you just want to consider communication with the community and voters, and that needs to occur before the question is certified in September. But if you can wait, and I think you guys can, I would try and wait as long as you can just to see where we're at, on this coronavirus timeline here.
I would also just suggest that we kind of keep this on our agenda, because I think what we can do in the meantime is sort of plan for how we would sort of throttle back from what the big plan was, and sort of have some discussions about what do we feel like are our basic needs, and where can we help supplement our general fund through, getting some of these capital things out of the way. So I think that can be a conversation that we start and keep having until we have more information.
Yeah.
I hear a lot of talk on general fund. Do we need to look at that? I mean, we have the Debt-Free Schools Act, which I do have some districts are pursuing these days, those that are capped out like you guys are. If that's a consideration, let me know. But right now we just have debt included in this one.
I think this is Linda, Dan. I think where some of this is coming from is, we transfer over $1 million into cap reserve every year.
Yep.
So if we can get some of those projects done, and that's where the board is talking about the burden on the general fund.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't make that very clear.
No, that's fine.
It's been running at roughly about $1 million. I think, Linda, you are correct. And obviously we've been consuming that for small capital projects here and there, and a couple of even unforeseen things, such as the HVAC work earlier this year. Not a criticism, just a statement of fact. And it would be ideal to be able to lower that allocation into the general, or excuse me, that extraction out of the general fund, maybe, $250,000 to $500,000 a year. So it's something on the margin, but I think we're going to need to continue to do some of that, even at the small projects level, just as prudent planning going forward. But leave the bond for all the big heavy lifting that we have been planning for, through Tom's work, facilities master planning, strategic planning, but then also the work on the affordable housing. inventory we'd like to expand. Yeah.
Yeah.
Things
Any other
haven't-
questions? Oh, go
yeah.
ahead.
I just say that, things haven't changed in that respect. The long-term view is that we still need to get ahead of this stuff. And I think Katie said it well, it ties back to overall compensation for for our staff. Yeah. And again, I think the community will line up with that quite well, even in the face of this crisis. We can get some folks to take the long view. Yeah, we get the vote.
Any other questions for Dan? Or Dan, do you have other comments?
No, I don't have any comments. Certainly feel free to reach out to me whenever you want. If you need to look at modeling updates or anything, we're happy to be involved.
Okay, thank you so much.
You bet.
And
Thank you,
we'll
Dan.
just be in touch so that, oh, go ahead, Linda.
No, I just wanted to say thank you, Dan.
Oh,
He's so helpful.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
Can I ask-
absolutely, you guys. Go ahead.
I have a quick question. This is Susie. Can I ask a quick question? Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Dan, you said to try to wait as long as we can to let the coronavirus play out. What is the latest we could wait?
Legally, you could wait as late as end of July before you would have to notify the county of your intent to pursue an election.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great.
All right.
Okay, so we'll definitely be in touch, Dan, and we'll just kind of keep this on the radar and kind of get some plans in the meantime, and then sort of see where we are in May.
Okay. Thank you, guys. Hang in there.
Thanks so much.
Same to you, Dan.
Take care.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks,
Bye,
Dan.
guys.
Thanks.
Okay, so we can just move right into our financial update. Linda, if you're ready.
I am ready, but I noticed that Kay joined the call. I
good.
don't know if.
Oh, yeah, thanks. Kay, are you there?
I am. Sorry, I was having problems demuting myself. So I apologize for that.
No problem.
So, my public comment is on behalf of AEA. So I know that AEA spoke with Susan and Dwayne on Thursday afternoon, addressing some concerns from the staff about following the proper procedures and protocols for hiring the superintendent. And then the staff was very much in shock over the announcement of the assistant superintendent and how that all came to play. There's a lot of mistrust now between the staff and the school board because we were told that there was going to be a very open dialogue and then there was a shift of thinking. And it would be great if you could clarify with the staff a little bit more as to your thinking as to why you went ahead and hired an assistant superintendent along with the superintendent.
And so we prepared we're actually have a communication to go out to staff that we're going to finalize and send out that addresses those. So since we talked to you, we kind of are gathering our, we wanted to make sure we had all the board sort of weigh in on what they wanted to say. So we're working on that, and we definitely want to clear all that up and then still, if there's more questions, we're happy to answer those as well.
Thank you. I think it was just making sure that everyone knew that we had chatted with you and that you guys are on top of it and that you're getting that communication out.
We are. It's close, so it should be soon. And we just wanted to make sure that everybody all the board members had a chance to kind of look over it and weigh in and put their part in it. So we'll get that out.
Okay, this is Jonathan. Could you just clarify for me a little bit when you said there's some mistrust on part of the staff with regards to the board? Can you just help me understand that a little bit better?
Sure.
I think we ran a pretty open and collaborative process where it was clear kind of where we were headed. So just, can you help me understand that?
Yes, the process of hiring the superintendent was very clear. You guys did a great job communicating that with everything. It was, the communication was that you would only be hiring a superintendent. And wondering behind some of the legal ramifications of hiring the assistant superintendent when that was not communicated to the staff that that's what you were going to be doing. It was something that the board decided to do on its own, which typically usually runs through a system. The reason why there's a little disgruntledness is John Malloy was moved up without any procedures from the last school board member. He went from assistant into superintendent position. And so there hasn't been, and other processes has happened in the past with that, with hiring. And so we're wondering if this school board is going to follow the normal traditional ways of hiring people, or if you are going to create some new policies and guidelines around hiring and go different ways in different directions. Does that make sense?
Okay.
Yeah, and that's good to clarify, because we can address that when we send out the communication. But I would just say that we have no plans to change the hiring process. That I can go ahead and tell you that we don't have any plans to do that, and we respect the way that the hiring process has been done for previous positions, and so we'll explain and reiterate that, though.
Great. Anything else I can clarify?
I'd like to add, if I may, Susan.
Yes, please.
Sure. I just wanted to make sure that Kay and Stephanie and the other leaders of the AEA that are on the call, they understand that we received a good many emails from participants on the advisory group, as some of you guys were as well, but also just members within the organization and members within the community, positive and supportive messaging around the process and also the result. And I understand the commentary about this being an extraordinary extra step of the assistant super position, understood. And we also try to, keep that as broad and as owning by the superintendent that was selected, owning that decision ultimately with kind of a veto power at his level. And he reviewed it and sat on it and slept with it and, spent some time with the assistant super. But that'll come through in the description a bit. But I want to make sure you guys understand that the quote of "there's now mistrust" is probably a fair statement, but it's not a universal statement across the entire organization. I don't want it to be characterized as such, at least from my view. I mean, I really, really appreciated the dozens of feedbacks that we got, both written and verbal, over the last, week or so. So thanks for at least tolerating my feedback on that.
And I would just say that I believe that we do not want there to be any mistrust. We want to clear that up. So that's what we're going to try to do. And if you still need more explanation, we can do that after this communication as well. So keep asking, and we'll keep trying to, give you details.
No, we really appreciate it. We're just trying to make sure that you know both sides, and we've heard both positive and negative, just like you guys too. But just like I said, we just want to keep that communication going.
Got it. We do too. Anything else, Kay?
Nope, I can be muted now.
And this is Susie. Can you hear me? Susie Zimmett?
I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay. And Susan, may I make a comment also?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So as you probably know, Kay, we didn't, and others, we did not intend to go in hiring both. That was not, but we became creative as it became apparent that we could have a really strong district leadership team, which we knew we needed in light of an upcoming bond election and in light of planning teacher housing. We had a lot of big plans for this upcoming year. And when it appeared that we had two really, really strong, really well-regarded, well-respected leaders, we became creative. And our legal advice was to announce at the time that we did and not to announce sooner. So I just wanted to make those issues clear as well.
Thanks, Susie.
Sure.
Anybody else? Okay. Thank you, Kay. And we'll get that communication out as soon as possible. I think we'll go on now to our financial update. Linda?
Okay, thank you. I am going to try something here, and I hope it works well. I'm going to try and share my screen a little bit because I did not want to publish some of the information publicly on board docs to go over, just because it had some employee stuff. Not that there's anything super confidential, but sometimes when people aren't hearing the presentation and the explanations behind it, they can run a little crazy. And in this time, we're all a little crazy.
Yep.
So that was my reason. It wasn't anything super high confidential. I just didn't feel comfortable putting it out there without a talk. So, okay, so I'm going to try and do this presentation now. Let's see if I can do my entire screen. Oh, so can you all see this?
I can't see it. We still see you.
You just still see me. Let's see if I.
Which is great.
No, that's not going. Okay. All right. Well, that's okay. I'll just talk to it. We'll go back to where we were.
Oh, so it's, I think we have to get out of the grid view to see your screen. Let's try that. You want me to try
what? We'll see if you can. Can you see it now?
Let's see. No.
Okay.
No.
All right. Well, this if I had sent out, Eliza had sent it out on board docs as certain, if you have management access, you can go in and you can download the PDF, and it says Board of Education April 6th meeting finance update. That's what I'm really going to talk to.
Okay.
And the first part of this is, I thought there's Rachel Zenzinger, who's in the state Senate. She gives out an article or a newsletter every month. And in her newsletter, starting April 2nd, she had a little commentary on when they're going to actually start meeting to discuss the long bill. And I highlighted in yellow that she said, despite a bit of good news, we are still running up against several pressing deadlines, namely those connected to the state budget. Constitutionally, we must pass the budget by June 30, and school districts need to pass the School Finance Act by approximately June 1st. So that really leads to the big problem we have, right? They're not going to tell us what our funding is going to be till next year, until about the time we need to pass the budget. So yeah, gives us a little bit of some craziness. So my advice and what I would like to do is, let's start planning our budget now, and let's assume that funding is going to remain flat from the School Finance Act, from the long bill, and take some decreases in with sales tax revenue and specific ownership tax, which is car registrations. Let's take some decreases in on those, and start planning accordingly to that, and plan our expenditures according to those assumptions. And then when the long bill passes, we can fly in those numbers and see where that leads us. So let's say that they end up decreasing our funding, then we'll say, okay, now we've got to cut another, whatever, 300,000 from our budget or whatever, but keep moving forward. I don't think it's a time we need to sit and not act accordingly. And I think the probability is very low that we'll see any additional funding. So let's just plan. That's a pretty conservative approach, I think, for us going into that. And so that's the next part of this. When I said 2020 and 2021 projected funding, those are the assumptions I made. So that said, if we were to keep funding per pupil funding the same and have our decrease of enrollment that we expect to have into next year and a 30% reduction in sales tax and specific ownership tax, we could see a little over $1.1 million in a decrease in funding district-wide. Yeah, so then I tried to list my assumptions underneath here so we can go back to that when we build going forward on these numbers. I did assume mill levy override. Yeah, and that's not assumption. That's right. Mill levy override will remain about the same, because as when Dan talked earlier, he was explaining how our assessed values, there's such a time lag on those actually hitting into a school district that you have a little bit of planning period up before then to see if you have a decrease in assessed values. And then I just put on here on the bottom of this bond debt payment amounts. I wanted to just show you what's happening with that. So it was a good lead in, and Dan's numbers were very close to what we have here that you see. It's going to be in the 2021-22 budget, it would decrease to 3.4 million, the debt payments. And then when we get into the next page, this is our enrollment count. And really, if you go to the top, there's two numbers I highlighted in yellow that are very important when you're seeing these things. And it tells us when you're looking at a kindergarten class coming in that is smaller than the 12th grade class going out, that's when you kind of some flags start coming up that you think, wow, I've got some declining enrollment. And you can see that this has been happening. I took last year's, or this year that we're living in, 2019's count, and then the projected 2020 count. And you can see that the numbers have just been slowly declining from the kindergarten class on forward. And another assumption I made in these is there's 10 kids right now in the charter school, and that's the blue highlights. And those kids would all move over into the high school. So that's why the 120 for 2019 increases to 130 kids into the 9th grade class. So what we are hearing currently is in the kindergarten enrollment could possibly be as low as 75 kids. So this 85, I kept it consistent from the year before, but we could actually see 75. And then the next page of this that I wanted to show, and this is the part that, these are just some thoughts that we've been meeting. Tom and Molly and myself have been meeting with each one of the principals and discussing, specifically like who do you have as kindergarten, first grade, second, third, fourth grade teachers? Who do you know that's retiring or has turned in their resignation? And then looking at those to say, do we need to backfill that position, or could we move if we have an extra teacher in, a third grade class or a fourth grade class? Can we move that teacher into first grade or move a first grade teacher down to fourth? I mean, there's all kinds of movement, and it's not. These are just conversations. There's nothing that's been set, but Molly really needs to have a full understanding when she's having these recs, these personnel requisitions for open positions, because there's some of them we are not going to fill. It's not may, we're not going to fill. So we just have to make sure the qualifications are right. And I wanted to give you that information so you have a kind of a basis of what is our full-time equivalents of teachers. So how many teachers we have, what was the possible October count that we had, and what would that ratio be? And we're trying to be very cognizant of not increasing any per pupil, any classroom sizes, so making sure that we have proper staff for that. Some of the other assumptions we're going on is, special ed is something that is just, those are so hard, those positions are to fill, and we always have openings in there, and we're just proceeding with caution. When we know that we are going to have some openings in that area, and we're going to look at those closely, each one. Molly and I will work closely together to make sure we're not over hiring, but we're also not under hiring. We have to meet those needs. The other thing is, I didn't present the high school on any of this information because their enrollment really is not declining, but we met with Theron and had a good conversation around some of the openings that he might have and how other people may be able to fill those openings or move some staff around on some ideas there to get a little creative. And then the last piece I put on there is just, because I think this is so important on planning, what is an average teacher salary in our district, and what is the para and insurance benefits. So it looks like we're sitting in a district at around 91,000 for each head count that we have. So every time we can, and I hate to use the word savings because it's not really savings because we have to provide those services too. But every time we can become more creative in our head counts and our allocations on what people do, that saves us a little bit more each time. So, so that was it. That was the presentation that I, not really a full presentation, but just some of the information that I have been gathering over the time period, and to know we've all been really busy with HR, and Tom has just been instrumental on helping us out to figure out, putting all these meetings together and meeting with each one of the principals to get a good understanding that we don't overhire, but we may possibly, if we decide to not do open enrollment or have choice that comes in into here, we possibly want to underhire and then look and see how the numbers come when the school year starts. There are some strategies, and if we are going to open up enrollment for the kindergarten class, we need to do that now. We need to get the word out, because parents, if they're going to move their kids into our district, into our classes, that this is the time of year they start thinking about those things, planning their schedule. So I know that's what I saw up and down the Front Range a lot. They would, open enrollment was almost like, I don't know, like a free market economy, if you will. There was advertisements on the radio, send your kids here. This district is so much better than that. I mean, people fought a lot for that. And the kindergarten classes is the premier class to do that in, because parents typically like to move into a school district if they're going to move in, put their kid in kindergarten, and then continue through the system.
So question for you, Linda, on the numbers. You talked about the numbers coming from the community school to the high school. What about from Country Day to the high school? Are you including those numbers? Because they kind of have a good idea who's going where right now.
Yeah, I did not include those. I took it as a flat dollar amount, not coming into the high school. I did not include those.
And I can jump in here as well, Katie and the rest of the team. We have met with Theron earlier around what we thought a projected number might be from Country Day School. At that time, we didn't have a specific number, but the range that it has been from year to year fluctuates between 6 and 12. I know Theron has been having conversations with those parents to determine how many in reality are actually going to show up. We don't know that number yet, and we didn't build it into this particular model just because we weren't exactly sure.
Okay. Their day should be April 10th is the boarding school day that they know if they're leaving or not. So,
Okay, very good. I would add one other thing. Linda and I have been in conversation together with Molly Owens and with Chris Baston at the elementary school around what the tolerance might be, the total number of tolerance we could put into kindergarten without having to add additional FTE. And we think we could open that up to 15 children without adding FTE. Now, if we do that and the numbers begin to spike after that, we might have to add another position in there or rotate somebody internally into that position to bring the ratio down.
So Tom, are you only thinking of opening enrollment for kindergarten or for other?
Well, the other grade that can tolerate it would be 5th grade. And that's another nice opening in our system.
Last year, when we launched a kind of selective, I guess, bidding auction process for families that were interested, it came out of the chute. Remember, it came out of the chute with good intention, but I'm sure a lot of the community kind of felt it was like last minute, and we just kind of threw it together a bit. Are we intending to do that very same auction process and communicate across the entire valley, in addition to obviously bringing our partners and their families from the community school? That pathway, I think, has been perfected, and I think we're going to approve that later in this agenda. So on top of that channel, are we looking broader in the K and the 5? Tom?
The only other place where we think we can go a little broader, Theron and I have talked about some flexibility they might have at the high school. There's some constraints there with kids coming late in their journey through the system. We did bring a few in this year. It didn't work for everybody. Some of them just didn't make it to the end of the quarter. So right now the focus is if we could bring in 15 at kinder and perhaps 10 more at grade 5, then with the rollover that we get from Country Day, we could just about zero out from the previous year.
If I could jump in here at this point too, you're right, Dwayne. The process, we came out of the chutes and we had a fair amount of interest.
Yeah.
Then that interest seemed to fizzle out over time as well. And one of the reasons is that the stipulation for entry was pretty narrow. In other words, if you're a parent of an incoming kindergartner, that's great. We'd love to have your child at our school. But if you had multiple other children, if you had a 3-year-old and a 2-year-old, I was unable to make that same commitment to that. So some families said, well, wait a second. Why am I going to be driving a kid up to Aspen and having my other 2 go to school locally? And it was a chance that people weren't comfortable taking. And I get that for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to piggyback on that, one of the things we saw as well, not just at the kinder level, but at the middle school level, we had some other families that may have had 2 or 3 of their kids accepted, but one did not. And so my recommendation going forward to the board would be that, number one, we open it for kindergarten, we open it for 5th grade, but we also reserve some flexibility to navigate with some of these families. If they do land a slot in one of those 2 grades and they have other children, that we would then look at what kind of flexibility we had in the grades of those other kids so we can make it a package deal. Now, it may not work in some classes if there are 130 kids in the class already in 8th grade, for example. But if they have some wiggle room, then we need to be able to negotiate with those families.
Tom, do we know what the demographics look like for preschools right now that are before pre-K4, the pre-K3 classes? Are we looking at numbers that are going to continue to be low, or has it changed in birth rate?
The birth rate went up over the last couple of years above the projected rate. So if we move up 4 years into this window of time when the assessed valuation starts to really drop, And we'll start to see some more kids showing up at kinder level.
But we have a lot of ways. I mean, from 85 to 120, there's a lot of room there. Are we getting even close to a full class in those years, or could we do what Chris is saying and offer it safely to younger siblings of kindergartners at this point?
For the next 3 years, we probably could do that safely.
I'm hearing in 5 years, we're going to have a huge class.
I don't know it'll be huge. I think there were 160 plus live births last year.
I think we're going to either have a lot of divorces or a lot of births in 5 years. I think it's something to consider. The number, between 85 and 120, but I would be very cautious about I believe our next year's 6th and 8th grade classes from those numbers are above what our goal ratio is. So we might need to be careful with those classes to allow them to get any bigger than they already are from out of district kids.
Mm-hmm.
That's my only comment.
Yep.
I would also just encourage us to probably make the announcement sooner rather than later that we would like to accept enrollment, and then
Absolutely.
just make it really clear what we're looking for up front, because
aren't we already at that date as compared to last year, Tommy? Right, Tom?
Yep, that is correct. This is the time, with the board's permission, and it sounds to me like I'm hearing that from everybody, is we would go ahead and pull some language together and get that advertised. I'd also let our neighboring districts know we're doing that.
Yeah, that'd be great.
And I think the board's also supportive of what Chris was describing, and Tom, you echoed it, the enhanced flexibility to be a bit more inclusive with those families with kids, multiple kids, and trying to find safe passage for all of them. I think that it also reminds me, Tom, of your kind of 8 to 10 year forecast that you presented to the board a few meetings ago, wherein we were expecting obviously continued drawdown, notwithstanding Burlingame and additional other affordable housing projects that Katie's brought up in the past.
Right.
I still fundamentally think that in the here and now we can show broader reception, broader inclusion, and flexibility. And it's just a good message from the district as well. It's just a good message in the broader community that we're trying to be as inclusive as possible.
Yep.
Yeah.
Agreed.
I agree too. Yeah.
Do we need to give formal direction on that, or is that something that is?
Right?
Well, if I was going to say something about the high school too, this is the great thing about the open enrollment that you can do at a high school. We can flex classes, and even if it is a large class. So for example, if you wanted to add kids to the junior class, which is large already, and you wanted to add that, you can always move teachers around section wise to handle that upload. So we could take, a good 30 kids and not even blink at the high school, especially if we spread them out amongst those grade levels. And the great thing about doing an open enrollment policy at the high school is that it has a shorter expiration date than a kindergarten open.
Yeah.
And so if there is any changes to overall staffing from the city, then you have a little bit more flexibility. I know that's something that we toyed with a lot in my previous district, and it was always a numbers crunch there. But it's a pretty easy way to open it up. And there is a lot of parents that from around the high school would be willing to move a kid too. So.
I have a question from the middle school perspective. If we're being told to cut 2 positions and yet we're opening enrollment at the middle school level, or at least trying to be flexible with families that have middle school students, it could be problematic at the middle school. And the positions were, one is a grade level teacher and one is an exploration teacher. And so both of those have impact on class size and the ability to offer a variety of exploration classes.
Yeah. Solid point. Obviously, that's going to be some of the limitation we just have to work with in this quote unquote enhanced flexibility. It's a really good point. But let's see what we can do, even with that existing constraint. Right, Liz? And let's just see what we can do.
Related to that, I have just some questions about funding, Linda, and where your estimates are with $1 million or 1.2 almost $1 million shortfall. I guess the question is how, on top of that, the extra, funding from AEF is potentially at risk as well, given that our donor base might have some issues with that. How, and again, I know it's preliminary, how big of a range do you think we should be considering? That's an initial estimate of a 30% decrease in the tax base.
Right now, I feel that's pretty, right now I feel that's pretty conservative. The one thing about the foundation is they've already had their major fundraiser that we would get next year. So I know they continue to fund on, so that's why I didn't decrease their funding amount on the $500,000 that they give to us in there. But it's I think 30% is an aggressive decrease, but I do worry about, the July. I mean, Tom sent me something today that was sales tax revenue that the Chamber of Commerce had sent out today, and about concerts and stuff that are being canceled in July. And I thought, wow. But I think going 40 to 50% is a little panicky. I think that's a little high. If I could just
interrupt for a second, just to make sure I understand the number that you're talking about, the percentage. Is there a lag involved in that, or does July revenue from sales tax come in July? Are we dealing with a lag here, or when you're talking about budgeting, or is it real time?
Yeah. So what we've done with our different organizations on sales taxes, we let them go ahead and collect the revenue, and then they pay us twice a year. So right now they're sitting with about 6 months in money they will give us in the July timeframe. That they'll have, that we won't see those decreases in there because actually they held back $300,000 too. So that will make up a little bit of it. But we let them hold the reserves, and then they pay it on to us. So the time lag coming to us is a little slow over when I would see the decreases. And that's why I said, last year we received this year we're living in, I guess, we received $2 million from them. And I said, let's just decrease that by 30%. So we'll get 2 payments of less than that.
I think as things progress, we can probably refine that a little more based on when the payments come.
Absolutely.
We missed the big part of March. April and May are slow, are done. Usually they're slow, but they're not zero. And June is done, and half of July is gone now too. So looking at those numbers, unfortunately, it's not just a decrease, and that's why I'm concerned about even 30% being conservative enough. When you go from, a big month to zero, it's different than a little bit of an economic downturn. So I think probably need to do, because that is a significant portion of what we're looking at for budget, and it affects the answer of how many teachers can we have. Do we need to cut down based on the pupil enrollment as well? So I think that's something that, looking at it more carefully as we go through and modifying it so we know what to expect as we go forward. Every week, every day something changes, right? So I recognize it's a problem, but maybe building a model that helps us look at that based on days of quarantine, that type of thing, it might be helpful. And I don't think we can really necessarily answer all these questions until we know what our enrollment is going to be. And then I guess my next comment on all of this is, I think we'll be talking about online learning in a little bit, but one thing that it does do is it gives us insight into how we can do some things differently. And we may in fact find some changes that might be helpful in this process to helping us figure out how to deal with the shortfall.
I completely agree with you. You know, we've actually, some of the things I didn't write on there, and I thought later today, I thought, oh, I should have, is, you know, we've implemented a work order system, sort of, that I asked Gary, anything going forward from April 1st on, Gary, I want to have on a sheet that comes to me before we do it. And we're trying to look for ways to keep, for example, bus drivers. Their contracts are really small. They really get a big chunk of their pay comes from extra duty pay. You know, picking up extra routes, taking all these added things on. So Molly and I have been working really close with Reagan, who's our new director of transportation, you know, working, saying, okay, what are some things we could do to keep that paycheck coming into them? What maybe some of the things that their job may look a little different, you know, so maybe they get to mow the grass, and I'm just picking stuff up, you know, just extra duty type pay things that we have, so we can cut all the contractors that we have doing that out of the picture. And that's, you know, that's kind of made us look at all these different tasks and services that maybe we've contracted out before and think of other ways to handle that. So we're working on skeleton crew, you know, with inside the building, and working on the employee housing. We're trying very hard just to say, okay, if somebody has a water line break or something, yeah, definitely we have to send somebody out, you know, we have to get that fixed. But let's not do the painting. Let's not do all the stuff that is the extras, I call it, you know. And let's see how we make it through these next couple months on our spending to really cut things back. And I'm curious, you know, we're new into this, but I haven't seen a whole lot of requests come. And yeah, we're, you know, it's like when your personal finances, when things get a little tight, you think of, do I really need all those cable channels? You know, we're doing that same type of stuff within the school district too. And really working very closely with Molly and all the different pieces to, and Gary, you know, to try and cut these things down. So I agree. That's making us look at how we spend.
That's great. We appreciate that for sure, Linda.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Linda? I think we'll probably want to keep in touch.
I think so too. I think it may be important to do this, like, let's, at the next board meeting, let's have another update and be smarter, you know, we'll know more.
I agree.
Linda, when do you think you'll have first draft documents for comprehensive budgets that we can begin to kind of dive in with you? I don't want to craft it with you, but obviously I think we all want to be very, very close to it, as well as have a bit of a voice in it, and make sure that we can own it and be confident with it, especially the assumptions that drive it.
Absolutely. I'm working on those now, actually. You know, it's a process. What I'm developing, and maybe this would be the best thing to bring to you guys, is a revenues assumption page and an expenditure assumption page. And those are kind of that start you on building the budget. And I'm working on those. And that's what these documents were, kind of pieces of that I gave you today, kind of starting. We're trying to develop a good system for it.
Yeah. Good.
Yeah, that's all.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
So let's plan on me for the next meeting, and then we won't have to make it as long, you know, as an update, maybe, you know, I don't know, 15 minutes or so. You tell me what time, and I'll make a presentation to fit that time.
Perfect. Yeah, that sounds great.
Yeah, next meeting, right, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
we'll plan on it.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Linda.
Thank you.
Tom, do you have any other comments about the finances? Or Jonathan, did you have something?
No, I just said thanks to Linda. That was it.
Okay.
And from my office, Susan, we'll go ahead and get some out-of-district language together, enrollment language.
Awesome. That sounds great. Okay. We're now at 5.3, and I just want to real quickly kind of go through what I think I can do to do my job better. So I'm gonna try to help us be better at our jobs. So I feel like as a board, we've done a good job of jumping in with both feet with new board members in December and going through a superintendent search process and spending a lot of time together and working well together. So I'm pleased about that, and I think that's given us some a good foundation. And I just want to keep working efficiently. And so I want us to make sure that we're governing as a board and that we're, oh, Susie can't hear, but I'll keep talking. Anyhow, I feel like we want to make sure that we are coming to a consensus and doing all the discussing that we do together, and then giving a good direction to our superintendent from that discussion. And so I just want to, I think we need to, and I will do this, and I would appreciate it if Tom would help. For each agenda item, we should frame it so that we know what's the board supposed to do with this agenda item and what's the outcome that we're looking for. And I think that could make us a little more focused when we're discussing things. And then I just want to make sure that we are getting to every board member give their comments and concerns and all of their input. And then we come to a direction for our superintendent. And so it just needs to be a little more structured, I feel like, and then we can make sure that we're giving clear direction. And so we can give direction through policies, and we can write a policy about communication and specifically how do we want the superintendent to communicate with us and when. And if we need to do that, I think that would be a good idea, but we just need to really make sure that we're giving that as a directive rather than just sort of wishing it to happen, I guess. So any comments on that? Happy to hear what everybody thinks. And then I think ultimately we should have a policy session, our policies, and have a whole work session retreat maybe in the summer. But I just want us to make sure that we're doing this efficiently. Anybody want to chime in?
We'll let the VP speak, although I think she unfortunately muted herself. Susie, can you hear? I'll chime in real quick to say, yes, I think that's correct. I think that I can't expect any board member to say no. I want to just going to be, the independent. We do need to be mindful that we make our decisions and give direction as a leadership team, not as individuals. However, I, for one, and I think, again, I hope that this resonates with all other board members, really, really appreciate the civil discourse and the professional debate that we can hold amongst board members in order to tease out and get to better decisions on the whole. And I also very much appreciate and respect the staff's professional ability to kind of participate and to tolerate at times, tolerate's probably a better word, that interaction and that discourse at the board level with that, the presumption of positive intention. I mean, I think all board members and I think all staff and I think the community, we're all of one mind that we want everything to be as best as it can be for our children. So with that in mind, we really work hard. We have that civil discourse, we debate, and then we come to a conclusion and a consensus decision. And sometimes it's not unanimous. And I'm not so much about 5-0 votes per se. I am about consensus. And there is something in the military that says once the decision's been made, you salute the flag and you drive on and support that mission with everything you've got. I think a lot of that philosophy and that core intent should translate into the body of work that we do. Once we get there, we make a decision, we salute the decision, we support it, and we give it everything that we can in order for it to be successful, again, with our kiddos in mind. The policy framework is just that. It gives us the sidebars and the rails to work within to guide us and to get us down the road in a more effective way, as opposed to just 5 independents pulling in 5 different directions on every single issue. So, the policy is a framework. It's not law. It's not statute, but it is a really good set of as I said, guidelines to help improve the decision-making of any particular governing board. So.
Yeah, I agree. And I want to make clear that I think the discourse is crucial. I mean, that's what we do, is we talk among ourselves and come to the best decision that we can. And so I certainly don't want to discourage that. I just want to make sure that we're doing that, and then we're coming to a pretty clear direction so that someone can act on it then. Anybody else? We don't need to. Oh, Jonathan, yeah.
Yeah. So, I think there's policy governance can mean a lot of things. And what I think we as a board since December how we have operated has been very different from past boards in our organization under no change in actual policy governance rules that are instituted. So I think there's definitely a need to go through some of that. And if we're going to stay with a policy governance model, I'm not sure that the letter of what we have written is necessarily what we've been practicing. So I think that there is a conversation that needs to happen regarding that. And I'm not saying policy governance is necessarily bad, but I will come out and say the way the past board did institute it was not good in my mind, and not something that I have any interest in continuing. I think the model that we've been working under, even if it hasn't been outlined clearly, and maybe we don't have 100% agreement on exactly what it means for everything, but I think from overall, it's a better model, our interpretation of it than the past boards. That's my opinion. Although I have gotten a lot of feedback from other people in the community on that particular thing. So I think if we're going to look at things, I have no interest in going back to the way things used to be, but I do have an interest in rejiggering what we have done. And I feel like we made a conscious decision to not address it until we got through our superintendent search. And now is the time. Having said that, I don't think, our model is perfect now by any stretch. And, I, for one, feel like we have had interaction that has been pretty consistent. Have we voted on things that we've asked for? No, but there's been kind of the general consensus. So, that's one question, is if we want something done, if we want information, if we have a request, I think one of the things we need to deal with in the short term is, can we just ask for that with a general nod from everybody else and still get it? Or do we actually have to sit down and vote on exactly what we want and blah, blah, blah? So I think we need some clarity on that because it's been a source of frustration for me in terms of how information flows. I prefer to have a little bit more clue what's going on, especially when we're going through a crisis like this, to understand, because recognizing that we're elected officials, we're getting questions and we're ultimately being held responsible. having no clue what's going on sometimes is extremely frustrating. So I think my view would be we would try to figure out a way to make that happen more clearly and capably in a short amount of time, not going through an extensive policy review in order to make some of that stuff happen. So.
Yeah, and I recognize and agree that it's, first of all, a unique time where things are changing so quickly. We need information more quickly, and so, you know, I don't know that it always has to be a policy change, but it should be something that we make at least an agenda item, and we discuss and we say, okay, this is what we would like and what we expect, and then it can be, you know, formalized a bit so that at least everybody's clear about it, and we can, you know, at the end of this COVID update, if we want to just talk a little bit about how we want to receive information and come to a agreement with everybody, and then give Tom that information, I think that would probably be a good idea. Anybody else want to?
So I unfortunately lost sound for a little while, and I finally got it back after I exited the meeting and then rejoined. So I missed the beginning of this discussion, but I have a couple thoughts about policy. One is that I definitely think, and maybe somebody said this already, I definitely think we should rework the wording of a number of the policies to make it meet our purpose, our desires. Such as, for example, maybe in R2, when we talk about English language arts, maybe mentioning that we want 1 or 2 pieces of writing a month, you know, something specific. I think that Dwayne has pointed out several times that he likes how the policies, if we go through them all, touch on every subject. And that's a comforting feeling to know that we have touched on every topic at some point. And whether it takes policies or some other system, I'm not sure, but that is comforting to know that at some point, if we go through our current policy review, we will touch on every subject. But I do think there's a chasm, a huge abyss between the difference between us giving direction to the superintendent and saying, we would like this, we would like that, versus what our current policy says, which is to just review the superintendent's performance and to say whether they did what was expected of them. I think there's a big difference between, hey, could you do this? We want you to do this, versus waiting till the end of the year and then assessing the performance. And that just seems like too late, you know, for many issues. And so I think that would be one of the areas that I would reword, that we don't just wait till the end of the year and then assess the performance. We participate in the performance throughout the course of the year.
Yeah, and I think those types of things, and you know, probably others, would be a good thing for us to work on this summer, and kind of really rework all of our policies if we can, but especially if we want more specific things like that in there, and just go over how those are working for us and how we can make it work better.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
Okay. Anything else, anybody?
No, I would just say, Susan, there's plenty to discuss in a big offsite, so I'm not going to get into any details there. Just the only thing I would say is, I think just being a little more efficient the rest of the year would be really helpful. If when we're going to talk about anything, you know, like you said, make sure there's a summary up front. Then, you know, whatever it is, the actions that are be taken currently by the administration or whoever to address the certain topics. And if we try and do our best to hold our questions, comments till the end, and also being very clear just what we're looking for from the board in each specific thing. Is it just informational? Do we want guidance? Do we need your opinion on something, or do we actually need some kind of decision? So I think just kind of that, doing all of us our best to just do the good, efficient meeting etiquette. It really starts, Tom, we need your help a lot there to, you can do a good job keeping us organized, and don't be afraid to tell us when we're getting off track. And kind of, being a guardrail, because sometimes when you're in a discussion, and so we just all need to, I think, to do a good job with that, of, being good monitors of ourselves. That would be my only conversation. And then having that kind of just, what is the defined structure for each topic, so we can quickly move through things, and having the discipline to hold our questions till the end, and then have the discussion and quickly. That would be it. That would be my only thought. Thanks.
One other thought, just, I think there's two topics here. One is the topic of normal board governance. And the other is, I think, a different topic, which is, what are we doing now with the world as it is, with lots and lots of changes going on in our district and here. And I would argue that perhaps some different rules apply right now, as we are going through some very unprecedented times. Meaning, I imagine that the support needed by the administrative and teaching staff is in a different place than it is on a normal day-to-day operations, as well as the input we're getting from the community and from parents and from kids and teachers. I could tell you that I have certainly gotten some input over how things went the first week. I would suggest that perhaps we have some different policies in place, or we have a different outlook on this as we go through a trying time and a transition at the same time. So I propose that, the conversation about what our policies are and how we're reviewing everything each month is one topic. This is how we're dealing with things right now is a separate topic that I think we need to make sure we're addressing.
I agree. Go ahead. I guess it's me. I think that, it feels too long right now it would take us too long to change a policy or create a policy or whatever. And so I see that. And I agree that that's not how we want to make decisions right away. I just want to make sure also, though, that we're making clear direction and clear requests of our superintendent, so that that's also efficient and he can act on them easily without confusion. So I think maybe we should practice on our next agenda item a little bit. And if anybody, do you have any other comments just in general about our governance process? What I'd like to do for the next agenda item is, and Tom,
before you moved, I just think Katie was mentioning, I think, two different things. One is governance, which I kind of think we're all in agreement, like we're gonna push to the summer. But I think what she was asking is, are we gonna operate any differently over the next couple months? And are we gonna maybe change and be more like, let's manage the current situation and the current events and make sure we are collaborating with the administration to do that in the most effective way possible. So is there some change we kind of need into the, a 4-hour meeting every 2 weeks with the, kind of old established schedule, or do we need to somehow change that operational style? And so I don't know that it's something we should try and answer right now, but I think that was the question that was raised by Katie, Susan.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, what I heard was we don't want to mess around with changing a policy right now when we want something done. And so that's when I said that wouldn't be the way we want to do things now. We definitely want to do them differently. and we should discuss, do we want to meet more often? Do we want to, have an update of some sort each week? Or, and I mean, we can talk about that now if you want to.
Well, maybe not to throw us off the agenda. What we could do is ask people for input and just say, what do you, and they can all send us your comments separately, and then just say, hey, look, here's, if I was going to change, whatever I would change about the current process, this is what it would be for the next X amount, 3 months while we're in this crisis. And then that way we don't have to, carry on a discussion now.
Yeah, I mean, I know Katie wants to hear information more frequently, and I would too. I mean, I think that's a big one, and how we receive that, maybe we can talk about how that would work best. So yeah, I think that's a good idea. Let's just kind of figure out.
Right.
But,
So then we'll all take home the homework to send home any comments about, what we'd like to do differently in the next 3 months.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. So our next agenda item is an update from Tom, and we also have principals that will give us an update. I believe we also have some metrics for measuring progress. What I would like for us to do, and Tom, I want to get your input about this as well, but what I feel like this will be is first part will be information, and we'll be receiving information, and we can ask clarifying questions and just make sure that we're listening and hearing all that they have to tell us. The next part would be, hearing what the metrics are that Tom has proposed for measuring progress. And then I think we should have a board discussion after that about if there are any additional metrics that we think we would like to see for measuring progress in this current situation. So that's how I would frame how we will go through this discussion. Tom, do you have other thoughts on that? Is Tom there?
Yeah, I am here. I'm just unmuting my mic, and that is fine.
Sorry.
So we'll start with some brief reports with the administrators, and I'll give you a quick little overview. We are now in day 4 of this particular process, and you will hear from the principals what their attendance rates are beginning to look like from day 1 to day 3 to day 4. I think you'll hear that there's a trend of not many students logging in early in the morning. Right? You'll hear more about that later on. And you will also hear from the principals some of the successes they've had and some of the challenges they've had. One of the big things that we were working on last week was to make sure that as many of our younger students, the day 1, 2, 3, 4 students, had access to the computers that they needed, and there was some articles about Chris Baston and the tech team and the group at the elementary school handing out. Oh gosh, I think it might have been close to 80 Chromebooks over the course of Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. So most families have received that. We still have a couple of families that are up in the Ashcroft region that don't have access. Those hotspots are ordered, and they are to arrive next week. Actually, later this week is when they should be arriving, and we can get those to them so they can have access. If we have the principals online right now, I would open it up to them so they can share with you a little bit of successes and or challenges that they experienced in the opening days, and then we'll cut to the metrics following. Principals on board?
I'm here. This is Liz. Do you want me to start?
I'm here, Tom.
you want to arm wrestle, Chris, to see who goes?
Go ahead, Liz.
Okay.
Here as well, just it takes a while to unmute, guys.
So Aspen Middle School has sent out a what's working, what's not form for parents and students to fill out. We have about 200 responses thus far, and we'll send this weekly. From this, we know students and parents seem to like the structure of the day. The students report liking the videos that teachers are making, as well as the Google Hangout time. Teachers are having to manage a lot more of everything, from answering emails, creating online lessons from scratch, technology questions, and Google Hangouts, while also juggling their own families at home. Jason and I are providing structure for them so they can create boundaries for themselves around the workload. Our counselors report that students are doing well and that they feel very supported on both the academic side and the tech side of things. Those that need more social emotional support have been reaching out for counseling. Our special ed and MTSS teams have created a one-to-one support system for working with kids on IEPs, 504 plans, advanced learning plans, and language learning plans. Teachers and paras are working with students during blocks of one-on-one and small group time that are scheduled daily. We have a daily check-in with students where they self-report attendance and well-being. We then analyze this data for necessary phone calls home or referrals to counseling or other staff as indicated. Our average daily attendance has been between 68 and 75%. When we are in session, during the normal school year, our average attendance is closer to 92%. We have begun to look at end-of-year activities to determine if there is a virtual option for such things as 8th grade continuation, 4th grade transition, concerts, etc. We think an all-school barbecue when we are allowed to see one another again would be a really nice way to celebrate the community. That's all from the middle school.
All right, thank you, Liz. Chris, you want to jump in?
Yeah, sure. So last week I sent out a video message to all of our families, which I received some nice feedback on. I conveyed the message of both extending grace and empathy and compassion to one another, while also being extremely hopeful about the future and knowing that this is a brand new paradigm and a brand new world for many of us. But I remain convinced that when this is said and done, we are going to be better teachers, better parents, better caregivers, better friends, better community members. On Monday and Tuesday of last week, all of our teaching staff reached out to the kids in what probably can only be described as a jubilant communication. The teachers were so excited to see and talk to the kids again, and the children were super excited to see their teacher again. So there was just a ton of cool stuff going on with smaller group hangouts, Google Hangouts, and with the teacher. And so a lot of excitement was certainly percolating. It was interesting as I reflected on the night before we launched our online platform. It felt to me, and the administrators in the room will completely get this, I had the same kind of nervous excitement that I have before the first day of school and the last day of school. A million things to get done, and just a general excitement. So on Wednesday and Thursday, we ended up distributing about 180 Chromebooks to our families. I asked our district nurse, Elise Dreer, to overlook how we were doing this from a safety standpoint. So I'm super indebted to her and to everybody on the team who was out there to safely distribute the Chromebooks in what was it could only be described as a really surreal moment. It was so lovely to see our families, but the circumstances were just beyond different. And there were lots of smiles and waves and thank yous, and the process ran very, very smoothly. And of course, we rolled out all of our programming to our 475 students. And the feedback I've gotten thus far has been overwhelmingly positive. That is not to say there haven't been problems, there have. And that is not to say that that it's perfect, because it isn't. But we knew that going into it. We just felt it was important to get started and to start to mold our programming based on the feedback that we get from our kids. Many of our teachers are sending very brief surveys to the kids saying, asking for feedback. Was this too long? How long did this take you to do this? Was it too short? Was it challenging enough? Was it too easy? All the types of things that we do in a classroom on a formative basis all the time. But so that's going to continue to kind of mold us as we go forward in both asynchronous and synchronous opportunities for the kids at the elementary school. We're finding, our parents are still, kind of finding their way and trying to figure out what the home school work day looks like when they're on their computers trying to do their jobs, and while also assisting the younger kids who are 5 and 6, and with the understanding that the capabilities of our 3rd and 4th graders are very different. They're very tech savvy, and so they have a lot of capabilities in that department too. All of this has to be looked through and viewed through the lens of what is going on here in our community, both with our teaching staff, our parents, and with all of us. Our teachers are reporting that they have communicated with families that have coronavirus throughout the family, in the house. Everybody in the family has got it. We have to be sensitive to that, and as supportive and helpful as we can be. On a positive note, all of our programming is up and running. Our school counselor is doing office hours all day long, which leads me probably to my last point is the teaching staff is exhausted. Getting a online learning environment up and running for parents in a really short period of time is exhausting, and everybody's feeling it. Now, those of you who know me know that I'm an endurance athlete. And the biggest mistake an endurance athlete can make is go out too fast, because you pay heavily towards the end. So my message is going to continually be to both our families and to our teaching staff is self-care and taking care of themselves. We're getting there school-wise. But if they neglect themselves and aren't able to take care of themselves, they're not going to be able to finish strong. And based on what I read and based on what I see and based on what I hear, there's this likely possibility we're going to be doing this for quite a while, right? So we want to be just as responsive as we in the 3rd week of May as we are in the early parts of April. So that's my message, both to our community as well as our teachers.
All right, thank you, Chris. And Theron, are you in?
I am. Just first of all, thanks to my colleagues. They did a great job really explaining the particulars of it. Liz, thank you for going through and explaining the rationale for the Google Classrooms and the daily check-in. Just know that's a process that I think is being shared at least at the secondary levels that we're doing. So that means that kids check in every morning in a grade level way. They do a wellness check, and they also check in for attendance and get any updates that we may have as a school. So that's happening. Another big piece of it is our feedback piece, which is what's working, what's not for each grade level. And so they're able to do that, and that delineates the priorities that we have moving forward. So very excited about that. We also created a teacher schedule. One of the things, I'm going to see if I can do a presentation here. hopefully everybody can see this. What we're doing with our schedule, and you can see the social studies office there, is we created something where not only do the teachers have an office hour, but they have 2 live class periods in which they can teach in that content area. We created a schedule around that so we didn't have people competing if they're going to have a live feed. A lot of questions around whether or not that can be required or not required. So there's a lot of things that we are figuring out. So for example, as Tom alluded to earlier, we have a huge amount of kids checking in after the noon period. Not a lot of kids checking around 8 or 9 a.m. So if your classes or your office hours or any of those things there, we're seeing that we're going to have to be thoughtful about how we structure our day to make sure and ensure that we have some sort of participation across the board. So that's the schedule. The other part of that is in addition to all the other things we did, we created a virtual safety check. As you know, we have a lot of things that can happen at the high school with kids, and especially given the traumatic nature of these times. If kids are self-reporting self-harm or some sort of need, we created a protocol that we can do virtually with teachers. We reviewed that with them on a couple of different occasions, so we're still able to maintain that. We're also doing daily check-ins with kids that we know had past issues and kids that are self-identified as having issues or have been referred to us by either parents or teachers. We're doing those checks as well. I think what Chris said is really important too. Just remember, this is not an educational plan. And I think that that's really important that we get that clear. We certainly have an educational plan in reaction to a pandemic, but that was not the original focus of what we did here. We have multiple issues where we've done check-ins with staff, because not only are kids experiencing things, but we have staff that are having childcare issues at home and doing all those things. And to add to the frustration of the workload that Chris alluded to, they are also just trying to make it through the days and having members in their peripheral families getting sick or themselves getting sick and having those sorts of things. So we're really trying to work and be flexible for every need, both on the staff side, the student side, and parent side, just so we have all of those things put in place. As far as our metrics, we've had, believe it or not, we had 90% of our kids check in the first 2 days. That is our daily attendance rate is typically 89%. So we have the virtual school seems to be working attendance-wise much better at the high school. And one thing that I'm excited to announce is that we have 100% of our students that have checked in. One of the things that we were really concerned about is that when we started this virtual school, that we wouldn't be able to find everybody, that kids would be dark and they wouldn't be responding and those sorts of things. So we've done very well, I think, in making sure that we've gotten to all the kids. Now that they've all checked in, the teachers are asking, well, they haven't checked into my class. So our next round is to make sure that every classroom has a touch with those students. And today, we reported to the staff that they need to have at least three attempts to check in with the student before they kick them up to administration. But we will be following up on any students that haven't checked into all of their classes and not just the Google Classroom in the morning. We have some particular challenges at the high school. April and May are typically the busiest months calendar-wise for us. There is literally every major event on the planet occurring from here until the end of the school year. Being put on hiatus is making us really examine, one, whether or not the events are going to happen, and two, if we do end up changing the nature of the event, what are going to be some of the ideas that we're going to do and be able to handle that. So we've had, right now schools are closed till the 30th, they open on the 30th, we'll be able to accommodate most of the events at the end of the year. If not, and we end up being closed longer, then we're looking at alternative events. Just know that none of those decisions be made without lots of stakeholder input. Some big considerations that we'll be discussing in our leadership groups this week are we have to talk about grades, credits, and college credits. All of those things have criteria to them that are a little bit different than what we'd experience in the other two schools. So we're going to have to come up with processes around that and how we're going to handle things like as simple as just making sure that kids are getting credit for graduation, to figuring out who the Valensal are and who's actually going to be eligible for college credit, both from concurrent enrollment and IB courses. So lots of questions around that. And finally, I think we've been getting great feedback from our parent community. I shared all that with staff today. The big items that we're having is just scheduling. So one of the things that we learned last week that, and this is, I like the idea of this just being a plan that constantly evolves, gets better, is we put together schedules for all of our teachers, and kids could view those schedules today. We handed out in the Google Classrooms a graphic organizer where kids actually have their schedule created with the office hours and everything already in it, so they don't have to hunt and peck for all of that information. Came out of our ESS team and our MTSS team because they were having so many kids that were having problems navigating that. So we've had a lot of success, I think, in getting that implemented and making sure we get that to every student, not just students that are identified. So it's just a great practice, and I hope every week that we come up with something that'll just improve our practice much more. Another thing that we've done is we've implemented a weekly staff meeting, and at the weekly staff meeting, we're asking 3 to 4 people to share their best practices so we can start to create a real knowledge around all of this. So that's a report for me. Just let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you very much, Theron. Thank you, Liz. Thank you, Chris. Quick follow-up before we open it up to some feedback from the board. A lot of information can be found on our website and at the individual school website. And there have been oodles and oodles and oodles of communications that have come from each of the schools. I don't know how much that information the board has been privy to, whether you're linked in with their the distribution of an individual school. If you are not connected with an individual school and you would like to be, please let Eliza and myself know, and we can make sure that you start receiving the individual school communication. In addition, as we begin to engage a little bit in dialogue in the next couple of minutes, it might be helpful to know what kind of information this board would like to have access to, because again, all 3 buildings have begun to significantly operationalize their program, and you have not been included in all of those operational dialogues. Sounds like you might want to be. And then the last follow-up, or the final sort of comment, is following our March 19th board meeting, I did follow up with the board, and I sent you an example of a resolution that CASB had presented. Different than the previous resolution I gave you relative to COVID. This was a far more detailed COVID resolution, which provided some emergency framework for how a board and a superintendent might want to work together going into this. I don't know if you've had a chance to review that. I can send it back out again if that's of interest. So that being said, I'll open it up.
I'd like it if you sent that again. That's one thing.
Oh, okay. Tom, for my personal interest in seeing stuff, is my priorities would be on that we're doing feedback from the parents, like Chris was saying, that, and the students, understanding, that we're making sure we're doing some kind of survey, and that we're asking people, how they're feeling about this, what could be better, what they like, so that we continually can, we look to improve, like just get good feedback, make sure we have a robust feedback system, and also that we could have some insight into that. And then the other thing I would like to see are, what are our key success indicators and how are those evolving? So I think Theron mentioned one that appears to be one of his, which is, did everybody show up? Are students checking in? So if we could get 5 or whatever, I don't know what the number is from each school, and they just say, these are the things that show us that we're having success in this particular endeavor, and how we're doing. So what we think, like Theron was saying, well, we thought we'd get less checking in, and we're getting more. So that's a good sign. Maybe they'll evolve over time, but if we could just kind of get some, and then that could be the focus of the update, and that way I think the communication would flow really well around this. that's my 2 cents.
If I could just build on what Jonathan said, I think those key success indicators are not necessarily by school. They may, because I see kindergarten, for example, is very different than fourth grade in terms of what it means for success. So I would want to leave that open to not necessarily distinction by a particular school, but rather a group. I mean, maybe kindergarten through second might be one group and third and fourth might be another. Whatever the principals and teachers think. Maybe ninth grade looks different than 12th grade. I don't know. So I would want some flexibility on that. And I would want also something that is pretty simple. Not something that's simple enough that we can get a weekly update on that. Not, every other week or every board meeting. Not a lot of writing, but just really some indication, and I don't know what the things are, but some indication of how the students and the teachers and the parents are all feeling about it. Because, while I've heard some feedback that maybe a junior thinks that the coursework is boring online, the parent might be thrilled that the kid's not watching TV all day anymore. So, it's not always the same. It's not always the same for each constituent group, just to keep in mind. And then obviously, some of the mental health stuff as well. But I would be careful that we do address while I understand we're under an emergency learning plan, not the original plan. We still have an obligation to try to educate everybody. So I would like to make sure that some of those metrics have some kind of an academic focus, such that we know we are progressing the learning of each student at the particular level, and whatever that means at that level. Again, different at kindergarten than it is at 12th grade. So on Jonathan's front of that, I think it makes sense to have each of the different schools figure that out and not necessarily stick themselves to one metric for each. Fifth and eighth might be very different too. So that's my feedback on that.
I also want to, kind of make sure that we're not creating more work for anybody at the same time. I mean, these are things that probably teachers and everyone are wanting to know themselves. So, don't make up something on our behalf, but maybe set some criteria so that those that information is being looked at and measured in some way. I also wonder if there's something that the board can do to show some support or outreach for our teachers. If there's some, if you all think of something that we could do just to let them know that we're here for them, and we realize that they're challenged by this whole thing.
Yeah, I think we had agreed to put out a statement, Susan, just with all the other stuff, we need to get to it last time, right? It's in the minutes.
Yeah, I think more than a statement. I'd like to, I don't know what it is, but
Okay.
We could do, I think combining both comments, we clearly could do something like a virtual kind of, office hours. And it's not so much that we are trying to administer as much as to support and relate. And, just kind of being an additional resource. And again, also not trying to practice mental health and the delivery of such, but just simply being a supportive and available resource, even if it's just to help facilitate someone that might have some struggles with a question within the organization or otherwise. And just making ourselves regularly available. And part of Jonathan's point would be, we put out a message to to the district and to the staff, and do that probably on a regular basis. I mean, in our company, it's not rocket science. So we are over communicating. That's what I keep telling all the folks in our teams. We want to do a good job of over communicating and spending the extra time each morning and midday and the end of the day to literally send in reports about who's present, who's not, what types of work are we able to do within the scopes of work that we signed up for with our clients, and how are we progressing against that in terms of how we measure our budgets and the scopes of work that need to be completed. This is from an essential services perspective. And it's kind of, really simple stuff, crawl, walk, run. It's the crawl stage. But yet it's really important that we do it. And I think that translates perfectly to this organization. And I think that what was said by Jonathan and Katie, and obviously what you just said there, Susan, in terms of don't want to create work, make work, but also want to just be a vital component of the support system that the district and the organization and the community needs. And I'll add, in what Chris said at the kindergarten level and the exhaustion, I'm married to a 25-year teacher. She's got the kindergarten up at the community school, and she has worked her rear end off for the last 2 weeks, getting herself to the level where she's comfortable and competent in order to have an online platform, and then creating content that needs to be equally accessed for each student. And then also think about kindergartners, those little kiddos, their parents are going to have to participate in the delivery. So the content has to kind of stimulate, connect with both, a 5-year-old, but also a 35-year-old, and try to find that balance. So it's just an exhausting work. The marathon and the long distance run, I think, is really good analogy there. Chris refers to. It is something we need to have some patience. We said it a few weeks ago. We got to be patient. We got to be good to one another. Our kids won't remember algebra or trigonometry or even basic reading and writing during this time frame. They're going to remember whether or not we were really good examples of patience and tolerance and leadership and care. And so that's where I think our space can be, where we can spend some of our time just trying to role model it without screwing up more than 5 times a day, which I typically do, if not more. So that's my thoughts. That's my feedback. I really appreciate all 3 principals chiming in with some heartfelt messages, but also some progress. Simple stuff for measuring, just scorecards could help us, just where they are, who they are, did they call in, what that type of, that's cool. That helps to kind of start to paint a story of subscription, just participation, and then we can build from that. So.
Would it help the board if we shared some of the comments we're getting in our what's working, what's not with our students, parents, and just create a stakeholder list of that? And because I think that'd be a lot easier than trying to, I'm trying to discern some sort of metric that would come out of that, other than identifying priorities for an agenda. It's pretty hard for us to figure that out. But because we are building the plan as we're flying it, so we are very much adjusting on the fly every week when we read these comments. And so I'll certainly, I'm just right now, I think, and I could share out some of this data with you if you'd like to see it.
Yeah, I think that would be great. Yeah. And I was going to say, as far as communication as well, I mean, we want to know, but we don't want to create more work. So it's the same thing. Like that would be helpful, and it's something that you already are doing. So I like that. Anybody else have comments or thoughts?
Trying to.
All right then.
So I agree with everything all my colleagues said. I wish that this were the season for poinsettias, but it's not. But like tulips or something. If there were an easy way to send flowers to all our teachers, that would be awesome. I don't know if there's an easy way though.
I do have a question about our bus drivers. Are we, Tom, I know you talked a little bit about trying to keep them employed in some way, or they maybe with RAFTA, or
Yeah, we don't have them employed with RAFTA. We are employing them in some creative ways with helping with food deliveries and doing projects around the district. Will get done. That doesn't require them driving a bus. So Molly has figured out an avenue to support not just our bus drivers, but our food staff, also our substitute, our guest teachers, to make sure that there's a bit of a paycheck coming in on their lives as well.
that's great.
Yeah. Let me follow up then. Thank you all for your input. I've tracked this down, and I think this is a good segue to a bit of an indicator feedback system we have in place, or that I've put in front of you. And it's I'm not going to try to share the screen. It is in the board doc, but it's called a kind of a remote learning coding and descriptor tool. I think it's described in an instructional planning tool. When you pull it up, it's a Google document, and in there I have a number of descriptors or codes of what we've asked our staff to be able to provide when we built the asynchronous system. And then what we've done is we've gone into there and we've actually identified if the expectation, for example, was teachers will focus on what's important, and the indicator is that the teachers will focus on the major work of the grade and the most important content, standards, and skills. We then ask ourselves, what questions, what would we see in this environment if we were to see that important work being done? And then there's some prompts in there around teacher cultivating reasoning and making meaning activities, students persevering through some difficult tasks, the teacher expecting evidence and precision from students, providing text evidence to support ideas. There's a series of things. And so what my office has done is we've taken these indicators that were in the asynchronous system, we've drilled them down, and we've created a fairly basic survey tool that will go out this week. The survey tool is embedded on the Google Doc in front of you. And in that survey tool, there's a handful of different questions. Number one is it just asks the parents to tell us what is the grade of the kid they're referring to. And they can be prompted to fill this out for as many kids as they want. And then we ask them some simple questions like, was my daughter or my son able to participate in how much of the learning? And there's a bit of a Likert scale from none to all. And then we ask questions about, did they enjoy their learning this week? Strongly disagree to agree. And were the lessons are high quality and engaging as determined by the parents? Was the coursework manageable? Did my son, am I as a parent able to support the remote learning? Was the instruction specific? Does my son or daughter know what's expected of them? And is there some consistent communication? And then there's a couple of optional survey questions that people can fill in. And what we can do with this information is I have a software program where we've taken this information, we've defined what we call descriptors. We can sift through the descriptors and drop those into the codes. The codes themselves are these indicators that we've identified, and we can crosswalk the two. And you will see in the document in front of you, there's actually 3 columns to the right side, one for students, one for staff, and one for parents. So the feedback loop I just referenced would all drop in that far column to the right, where we can start getting some more empirical data in a timely manner. We'll send the first one out at the end of the day tomorrow, because that'll be the end of day 5 of instruction. And then we'll follow up again on Friday as a follow-up, and then we'll continue to send this out every week. And as we get feedback on the tool, we can tweak it. But again, the idea here is we want to keep it super simple. It'll take them between 1 and 3 minutes to complete. If they want to add narrative, they can. In the meantime, we have these other what's working and what's not working tools that Theron has referenced, and Chris and Liz. And again, this other system that I'm working in can sift through that narrative, identify the descriptors and drop those into the codes and start to give us some some data that we can work with there. So that's the process we're working on. We realize that this might be a little more work than normal this time of year. However, we also have a unique opportunity in this industry to capture this moment. We may never get a moment like this again, really empirically capture some ways of thinking about how this has been successful at this scale. And so that's important to my team to be able to do that. And that's what we're working on. So questions, comments, thoughts about metrics in front of you?
Yeah, I have some clarifying questions. I'm confused. So this form gets translated into different questions for different schools and then get summarized when the parents respond. Is that correct?
No, it's the same form for every child, for every parent.
And if you're able, all of those like 20 or 30 line items?
No, there's only 9. In the form, there's only 9 questions or 9 items.
Right, but the remote learning planning tool form that was attached in the first topic, first line says teacher will deliver asynchronous learning, and then there's another one in blue, teachers will focus on what's important. And there's a number, like lots and like 3 pages of line items.
Yeah, it says what you might see if you were observing this, or if you were moving through the lesson yourself.
So I'm still confused. How is that form related to the question?
You will not see that kind of data there. What you will get is I will get empirical data on the items that are in the survey. The survey are crosswalked to be valid for the items in the learning plan. The learning plan is actually designed for us to get more detail from students and from our staff as the what's working and the what's not working detail is brought in. And then what I will do in column 3 to the far right is I will crosswalk the items in the survey into the items from the learning plan indicators.
Okay, I'm still confused. Unfortunately, you keep coming in and out a little bit, so it's hard to follow. It might just be me, but so we have a survey that's coming out from the district, and then every parent will get a survey for each kid that's in each school as well.
Well, it comes from the district. It's optional. They can fill it out if they want. And then what our schools are doing is they're sending out these what's working and what's not working to their students. So that information is coming back on the student side, and then the principals are also getting information back from their staff.
Okay, and that somehow all gets compiled in this form by you somehow. Is that
yes,
correct?
That is correct.
Okay, and how often is that happening?
Well, we haven't sent out the big survey yet. That goes out tomorrow, so we'll get those collections. As we heard from Liz, she's starting to get some data submissions now, as is Theron. I don't know what the data submissions are yet from the elementary school. Hopefully by the end of this week, I will have information, a data set that's relative to kids. I'll have a data set relative to staff, and I'll have a data set relative to parents. At which point we can start crunching those numbers at the end of this week and the first of next week, and start to drop some stuff into this learning tool so you can see some numbers.
Hey, Tom, this is Susie. About 70% of the time we can hear you clearly, but then sometimes we can't hear you. So if you stay right close to the microphone, that would be great.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Did I?
Sorry. Talking away here with no microphone.
Oh.
Any other questions or comments for Tom? Board members, do you feel like you've gotten a good idea and a good start to getting some feedback about how things are going?
Yeah,
Everybody feel good about that?
let's see how this plays out. Obviously, like Tom said, and I mean, I think we just need to see it in live and start to take some traction and some action, and we'll get used to it. That's cool.
Okay.
Yeah, it's hard to respond to that, Susan, because I don't understand what the form is going to output. It doesn't really make sense to me, because it's a lot of lines and a lot of columns, and so I don't really get it yet. So let's see how it works out and if we're getting what we need from it or not. I do want to make sure that there's a focus on one thing that struck me last week when Liz was talking in particular about the middle school plan is that I really liked was the presumption that we may be in the situation for the rest of the academic year, and how she was having her staff focus on the main points they needed to make sure that they address, the main learning points that they address through the end of the year, and backward mapping that. And so I would want to make sure, and I didn't specifically see anything on that form that really addressed that. But again, it's hard to understand not knowing what the output looks like. I would like to make sure that we have some clue when we emerge through this where we are with learning, knowing that we're probably not going to check every box in every grade level and every subject to accomplish the curriculum that we're supposed to do. And knowing that that's not possible, we do need to know where we are and what the plan is and how we're meeting that plan. So that might be a longer term than a shorter term, but it's certainly, I think, a responsibility of ours and the staff to figure that out.
And it did seem like on your sheet that there was some mention of the major work of the grade, so that teachers are looking at that and then hopefully backward mapping to make sure that they're covering the major pieces, right?
Right. And we've been explicit, and I've been explicit with the principals that while we're only specifically closed for a short period of time right now, March 30th. I'm sorry, did I say March 30th? The end of the month. It is likely we may remain closed for a much longer period of time. So they're having those conversations with their own staff, recognizing that when you focus on the major work of the grade, that by definition is a planning backwards. What is it we need to get done at the end of this year? What is the focus of the grade? And then you go backwards from there in order to achieve it.
Great. Anybody else have any questions, comments? Okay. We'll move on, and we'll look forward to hearing more as we go forward. Thank you for working hard to support our teachers and to get this going. It sounds like we've launched. That's something. That's good, right? All right. Calendar dates. We just have our next board meetings coming up. No events to go to. Reports and comments. I put just a little comment about the choir room. I put an update in there. I've been talking to the interested affected parties about that, and we're getting closer to a solution, I think, with the existing choir room and potentially removing in the middle school and potentially removing that wall. So that's kind of all I had for an update. Anybody else want to just mention a update? Anything?
I'd just like to say, since we didn't really have an opportunity at the beginning to talk through this, which is, thank you to all the teachers and parents and kids for, the confidence and the effort through this. It takes everybody to be part of it. And I think a lot of the kids were excited to get back and have something to do. And the parents were also excited about that. And the teachers definitely took the brunt of trying to make that happen. So, thank you to everyone. And, please give us your feedback on what's working, what's not, to both the school heads and the administrative staff, as well as to us. It wasn't perfect. I definitely had some complaints from some folks. on how it went down, but I think we're processing through it, and it sounds like everyone's keeping a very open mind. So thank you, and continue to keep communicating with everybody.
And let us know what we can do. Okay. Tom, are there any administrator comments or updates that you want to mention?
No, I think we can keep moving on.
Okay. We're at GP8E, and so that would be a place where if we wanted to have a meeting before we're scheduled on the 21st, we could set one. And maybe it's a shorter meeting to get an update, or maybe we can come up with a more efficient way to get updates. But this would be a time to potentially do that, if anybody wants to.
I would just like to quickly, if the principals are still here, because I think I'd like to hear updates from the individual school heads as well as from Tom. I'd like to hear from them what they think would be an effective way to communicate besides what we've asked for in sort of these metrics. What would be an effective way for them to present that to us? How if we were to do it on a weekly basis opposed to every other week, if they think this type of a meeting would be effective or not. So I kind of want to throw it out to them, and how would it work best for them to give us a debrief on what's going on?
This is Liz. I feel like right now it's such a moving target that we've asked teachers to think in 2-week increments, and that might give us more kind of information about what's working and what's not. So I guess my vote would be to look at 2-week increments at first, and then maybe moving into weekly, just because it's all so new right now. And then, you know, like Theron was saying, the anecdotal reports are pretty telling, and it's easy to summarize the anecdotal reports because there's not a huge variation. So we could provide some common anecdotal comments and then some outliers. But as far as figuring out like what the learning is that's going on, I feel like we need a little more time to get everybody on board and into a rhythm and into a routine. So that's, I don't know if that answers the question, but that's kind of my thinking.
Well, and I don't want to take up your time, you know, unnecessarily. So I certainly respect that.
I also would like to share that I agree with Liz. There are too many unanswered questions right now in regard to what success looks like for certainly through a K through 4 building. That will reveal itself as the programming ramps up and teachers have a better feel for the capabilities of what the kids and families are able to do. So I can't answer that question right now. I don't know what those indicators are. We're looking at them, we're looking for them, but they're going to probably reveal themselves. But I don't know precisely what timeline that is.
Yeah, as far as I'm concerned too, I think we're still trying to figure out, Katie, we're still trying to figure out what it is. I mean, I don't even know what our major problems are yet. We're still identifying themes with each things. Like there's, obviously millions of issues around scheduling of students, overlap of office hours, all of those sorts of systemic things that have nothing to do with achievement. However, if we don't address them, it'll have a lot to do with achievement. So it's like we have a lot of systemic things that we have to work through that we're still trying to troubleshoot. just like today, it was a godsend having that sheet presented by Becky Oliver to the crew that had just a graphic organizer for kids to put together their schedules. That made a whole huge difference for a lot of kids instead of having to navigate a lot of that information on the Google Classroom. Multiple recommendations made on how they can improve their classroom access for things like, for example, putting their office hours as a topic in the classroom, which just means that rather than moving down the screen as other things are added, that it's left there at the top. Little simple mechanical things like that are the things that we're dealing with right now. We are trying to figure out what is essential assessment-wise with each of the students, and that's a question that we talked about today. What is the essential pieces of your curriculum that you want to impart to kids in this last quarter of school, and recognize that kids are going to have varying degrees of efficacy in which they can reach it, and just really be thoughtful about how to move forward with your teaching around that. So I think I'm going to echo kind of what everybody else is saying here. It's really too soon to tell. I certainly have no issue with you guys taking a look at some of the what's working, what's not data, so you can see just some of the things we're facing. And, anecdotally, all we do is we throw those together as priorities into agendas and just share them with our various groups, whether it's the office team, whether it's the department chair team, whether it's the whole staff, whether it's the ESS team or the MTSS team. We just try to find those things and then start to develop and craft a little better situation each week. And I know that every one of us have our own challenges, and I think in the high school we're so fortunate. This environment probably lends itself best to our students because they're very used to this kind of environment. And I also think it's a really good training ground and proving ground for them when they go to college. I put that out in my notes to the parents today, that you're going to have to learn how to navigate some of these systems on your own when you get into college and things like that. So I feel like we're in a really good spot to be doing some of that work, but it doesn't mean that we're not without lots of challenges. And then just getting consistency across all the staff is tough too. I did a walk through the office hours the other day, and other than giving my teachers advice on what their backdrop looks like in the camera frame, they're hearing some of those conversations was just great listening to what the kids are asking. I think more than anything, they're just lonely and want to talk to a teacher. And I really felt that going through. So there's great stuff going on in those classrooms. And so that's another thing, maybe a virtual visit. That might be something that would be great when you can come in and maybe take a look at what's going on. Any of those things I'd be open to.
I think, thank you guys for that feedback. I think personally, rather than perhaps if we could get a sort of 10, 15-minute update from each of you next week along those lines of this is how we've progressed, this is what we're thinking about now, this is where we are on progressing toward developing these indicators at different levels, different grade levels. I think that would be very helpful to me, at least, to feel like we are in the place where we can monitor that in a meaningful way. If you're not at the point where formal metrics make sense yet. At least that's what I think. I don't know what other board members.
Well, I was feeling that as long as the principals and Tom know that we care deeply and are very interested, and if we can help and if we can be of service, we're here. Whether it's a weekly or bi-weekly, I don't feel strongly. I just want to make sure they know that we care and we're here, and if there's something we can do, we would like to step in and do it.
And I'm mostly concerned about, adding additional duties or time to everyone's plate. I don't want that to be just something you need to do to update the board. So if you're sharing, the what's working, what's not with us, and then we get an update every 2 weeks, I feel pretty comfortable with that. Unless it seems like not a big deal to update us more frequently.
I'm good with every 2 weeks of actual meeting, and I'm also good with just like you said, just publishing some of those updates, and let's just see how this thing evolves. I'm comfortable, and frankly, if I ever have a question, I'll just pick up the phone and call Tom. Tom, you have to be, obviously, as you've been in the past, a superintendent that's available, accessible to all 5 of us. And I don't expect that posture to change. And I'd ask you to, no surprise here, just going to be extra mindful for needs and communicating directly with us at times, if that's cool. Sound good?
Yep, that is good. I guess a follow-up question again to the board. Are you in receipts of the communications that are coming from the principals right now?
Not all of them.
Okay.
Yeah. I get the middle school regularly, and that's it, I think.
How about we put the board members on the school emails for now, for our school email. I'm getting them on my personal email because of my kids and only the schools that they're in. It would be nice to have them in the board email and just have the whole board copied.
Yeah, we can do that, and careful what you ask for.
It's not like I'm lacking for emails, but I do want to see it. All right. So let's shoot for the 21st. We'll get another update from principals, and then in the meantime, we will get the what's working, what's not reports, and each school's reports, and then can communicate with Tom any questions or specific information that we might want to get before then. Sound good?
Yes.
Okay. 7.2, we've got our community school charter renewal application. And our recommended action is to adopt as presented. Tom, do you have any explanation or comments that you want to make before this?
The charter in front of you reflects the notes of the conversation that this board had with the community school board and also with Michael Hayes. So he captured those notes and we made those changes. The original version was a red line copy that you had, and what you see is the final version. So again, the key changes from previous years were 8th graders matriculating on up to high school and the distribution of funds. Those are the 2 main talking points and changes from previous years. Otherwise, the charter looks identical to previous year's charters.
Okay.
I have one clarifying question just to make sure, and this is only asked because of the situation we're in. There are some very specific months that are given as to when funds are put forth. And I just want to ask the question again to make sure that nothing has changed in how we're anticipating our funding to come in that will prohibit us from being able to meet those dates that are specifically outlined in the contract. Based on changes, and I didn't see any outs if we don't get money when we're supposed to get money. So I just wanted to ask the question about that. Now, I assume it would be okay, but was that contemplated in any way?
Yeah, and Linda, if you're on board, you can chime in as well. But I received a message through the finance project in Denver on Sunday, and what we are hearing right now is that the certification of the mill levies that O'Connell referenced, those dates for certification will not change. So that's going to remain the same going into December this next year, and that then drives the release of funds for the following year. And right now, the word from the state legislature is that is not changing at all. We maintain the same distribution of funds that we've always had.
Any other questions? All right. Are we ready to vote to adopt the Aspen Community School Charter Renewal application as presented?
Hold on,
Okay.
if you don't mind. Katie, did you get your question answered on that one? Was that clear? Because I think that was one part of it, but I don't know if that was the whole part of it. That was just state statute, per pupil funding, but I think you're speaking globally.
just to be clear, I do not believe from reading the contract, we are protected from delivering funds in the time contemplated in the contract, even if we don't receive them on time.
Right.
So there is a liability in that contract, the way it's written. And I understand why it's written like that, but there's no like clause that gives us an out should we actually not get funded and have to take out a loan. The way it's contemplated, we would have to take out a loan to pay the community school. And if that's a risk that everyone's willing to take, we need to understand that that's what we're doing by the way the contract's written in these times.
Yeah, it's a good point, and I had not thought about it in those frames and in that perspective. And I'm sure when Michael and Casey are there, when they have their chance to chime in, I'm sure they too will wish not to create, some sort of harmful adversarial position. We may want to ask the parties to look to that and kind of strengthen those provisions in this document as a friendly, amendment to it, and or approve it subject to some sort of creation and final review of those, that language that would contemplate that scenario, right?
And maybe the scenario isn't that we don't fund, but in that situation, we would be going for some kind of loan to bridge payroll as well. And maybe we do that for them, but we recoup some interest on that at, the tiny little bit of interest that there is now.
I'm sorry. I have a question, Katie. Like, you're talking about where it's the disbursement per pupil in 12 monthly installments. Is that what?
There was. I can't see you guys and look at the document at the same time, but there was something that talked about 4 separate months that the payments would occur as well. It was like December and.
It's September, December, March, and June.
Yes, thank you. If our timing gets screwed up from any of our sources, including, the sales tax sources as well, which we're now sharing, I'm just concerned that we're putting ourselves in a position to float. And I'm not saying that it's anybody's fault. Like, this would not have been contemplated before all of this stuff happened.
Katie, would you be willing to come up with some wording to modified word?
I would think an attorney would do that. I'm not capable of making sure I get every part in the contract. It's too long.
And I'm not sure that the contract actually says that we have to pay if we haven't, because it talks about us, because we've actually received the per pupil funding and then hold back 10% and then send it on to them. And so it seems to me that we need to just verify that means that it would have been that we received the funding before we have to pay it. So I think, and just a question for whoever drafted the contract would hopefully be able to clear that up.
So let me jump in here briefly. I just shared with you in the chat room part of the appendices to the contract, and it is contract language related to finance. And if you open up that link out of the chat room and you go down to, I believe it's page 2.
It won't let me open it.
Yeah. We'll have to receive approval after you request it.
We don't have permission.
Yeah, let me see. Yeah, I think Michael Hayes is the owner of it. Well, let me just read this to you since I have you in front of us here. Let me go down to the proper page. It talks about the disbursement of district per pupil revenue funding, and I believe it speaks to your concern, Katie. It says the district will disperse funding under 14A1. That's referenced earlier, the 4-month concept, and the dollars in 12 monthly installments to the school as soon as practicable as the district receives those distributions from CDE, if applicable, or from local property tax collections, And then it goes, notwithstanding the foregoing, to the extent such pupil revenues are reduced or otherwise not realized by the district for any reason, proportionate reductions shall be made to the school by adjustment within the fiscal year as determined by the district. The district may also adjust payments under 14A4 or 14A5 to reflect actual tax revenue collected.
Good news.
Sounds like it covers it.
That addresses it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Okay, good.
Back to,
Thank you.
could I have a motion? Are we all ready? Is everybody good with their questions and comments?
I have a question. I want to make sure that I ask the other side of the contract. You may include this during discussion. I don't know, but I want to hear from Michael and Casey, not play by play or blow by blow, but just some sort of affirmation that this has gotten to the spot where they find it to be equitable and fair on their side as well.
Michael, are you?
I believe Michael's on the line. If you're able to jump in either through the chat line or directly. The question's to you, Mike.
Just got it on mute.
Yeah, this is Michael. Thank you. Took me
Hi.
to navigate my computer. Hello. And thank you for all of your work in these trying times, everyone. I know that our educators and board members and our families are all figuring this thing out. So here's to assumptions of positive intent and everyone working their tail off. I had to say that. But to put it very shortly and succinctly, yes, this is indeed what we're looking for. This is a wonderful win-win, same team, home team approach. We're very appreciative.
Great. Good.
Good.
And
Appreciate that.
Michael, if you would, you and I talked a little bit about how the timing of this adoption is a nice segues nicely with your own enrollment process today. Anything you want to add about that?
Indeed, it does. It really helps with our enrollment process. Our enrollment process closed for new students on April 3rd and for returning students intending to re-enroll. And we will be conducting our lottery this week. Therefore, the matriculation of our students to Aspen High School is very relevant to us even over the next few days as we're offering those seats to new families and or whether our existing families are considering whether they're returning or not returning. So this is very much appreciated on this timeline.
Excellent.
Thanks for asking.
Okay. Thank you, Michael. All right. I will now take a motion to adopt the charter renewal application as presented.
I motion that.
Second.
Okay. Susan Marolt,
Aye.
Dwayne Romero,
Aye.
and Susie Zimmett.
Aye.
Motion passed.
Yeah.
Aye.
Are you going to call all five?
Okay. Katie Frisch
Aye.
and Jonathan Nickel.
Bingo.
This is Jeffy. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Hi there. Hi. I just wanted to thank all of you. This has come from a lot of hard work between our two boards, and it was something that was started over 5 years ago, and I just want to extend my appreciation for the hard work on part of both boards and both of our communities. And my only question would be how we want to message this out or communicate this out. I don't know if it's better to come from a joint letter from both board presidents, if it's better to come from Michael Hayes as the executive director of Compass, if it's best to come for Casey, but it's, as Michael mentioned, it's the timing piece is important to us. So I just wanted for us all to be on the same page for how we communicate this out to the community.
I would love to have a message from both boards. I think that feels pretty good. I would like that.
Yeah, I agree. So Susan, maybe you and I can figure out a time to talk tomorrow and kind of draft a letter, just a brief letter from the both of us that we could share out to our families.
Yeah, I think that's great.
Okay, so I'll email you my contact information and you can get back to me with a good time and we can do that.
Perfect.
Okay, sounds great.
Yeah,
Thank you all very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
It's newsworthy stuff, I think.
Yeah.
It'll be very,
Yeah.
very well received. It should make the paper and be very, very cool. Yeah.
I like it. I mean, we've got to really highlight our positive news these days.
Agreed. Thanks, Dwayne, for that comment. And Susan, I'll be in touch with you about a time for us to talk tomorrow.
Okay, thanks, Jeffy.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to move on to 7.3. We have some calendar changes. Tom, do you want to explain those to us? And
Yeah, I'll do that. The only change we're asking in the calendar in front of you is to change the May 8th K-6 assessment day from a K-6 assessment day to what we anticipate will be a K-12 work day. You've already adopted the calendar change, which provided for the April 20th day to be a work day, and we eliminated the spring holidays. So you made that adoption already. However, the May 8th day is really just 32 days away from us. And we have to have calendar changes adopted 30 days in advance. So I anticipate that if the governor indicates that we're going to maintain the same level of physical distancing, then we will continue to be in a remote learning environment. And the idea is that the May 8th day would be a work day for all staff. So that's the action I need you to take, is to adopt the calendar and make the knowing that the 8th will change from a K-6 assessment day to a K-12 work day. And then following that, if we want to have a dialogue around the calendar for the rest of the year, we can certainly do that. But that's the action in front of you.
So we're adding, if I understand correctly, we're adding a teacher workday in the current schedule for 7 through 12. And well, we're changing an assessment day to a teacher workday.
That is correct.
And what's the reasoning? I don't understand.
Right now, it doesn't, that particular day is already scheduled for K-6 to have that work time. It doesn't include 7 through 12 to have that work time. And the recommendation from speaking with our association members this past week is that if we are going to be in a remote learning environment time, that would be time well used by the remainder of the staff, the 7 through 12 group.
What about the assessment portion, though? Do they not think they need an assessment day anymore for K through 6?
We're not running those kinds of assessments, so they're not running that data. So the CMAS and the STAR and all those broad formative assessment pieces are not what they're working with. However, if it is going to be a work day, they can certainly work within the context of their content and or their grade to have some of those backward mapping conversations. Are we as a grade moving in the right direction?
I'm hesitant to remove one more instructional day. I'm a little nervous about that. So,
well, keep in mind in the previous adoption, we eliminated a student holiday, so that's now an instructional day. That was.
But we also eliminated a whole week.
Yep, that is true.
So, I mean, here's my concern, and I recognize that teachers are being stressed, but we are also officially only asking them to work for 4 hours a day.
Well, I'm going to push back on you, Katie, because I was speaking with a staff member today who described that 2-hour work, of their office hours to prepare for the 2 hours of instruction. And it took them close to 8 hours to do it. And it has consistently taken them 8 hours because this learning curve is so steep right now. We had one staff member last week in trying to create a document that they wanted to put in front of everybody. It was a 10-hour exercise for a 15-minute lesson. So I see what you're saying, but it's not apples to apples when we're talking hours. It really isn't. We've heard from staff over and over again that they're putting in a ton of time to make this work. Now, we're not asking them to log their time. if we were to ask them to log their time, we'd be paying OT to a lot of people.
Can I just add one thing to that? We're asking them to have time with students that equal 4 hours a day, but I'm telling you, these teachers are working 3 times that to prepare for those 4 hours of instructional time. And if you're asking what kind of gift you can give them, the gift of a workday is huge. Sorry, that was Liz.
And I also, I think an instructional day is different from an assessment day. I'm not sure they're losing out on, if they were going to be doing either formative or summative assessments that day, I'm not sure that they're missing out on learning, Katie.
Well, that was only for K through 6 that had the assessment day. Everybody else, 7 through 12, had a regular day. I'm just, I feel like I'd be remiss if we didn't ask the questions related to, an instructional day, certainly for 7 through 12. When we've already, lost some and we know that we're less effective. So I'm not saying I'm voting one way or another. I'm just asking the questions because I think it's a reasonable question to ask.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I appreciate hearing from you, Liz, and Tom, just about what it's actually is valuable to our teachers and what you feel is necessary for them. So I feel confident taking your recommendation as far as what those teachers need. Anybody else have other comments or questions?
I'm good.
Tom, I would just ask, I'm trying to look at how it's spaced, Tom. I don't know if it'd be better to move it to the 15th. I mean, if that's, just kind of to give them, you got like 2 back-to-back. So we get one, the 20th, and then like 2 weeks later, you get another one, and then it looks like they might have to go a little while without it. So you might just oppose as to, if the idea is to like think of when's the best time for them to get a break to help improve their instructional thing, as opposed to just switching a day that was planned for testing. Just maybe think about it in that, I'm in agreement with that idea, but just maybe look and see what would be the best day. But I mean, if we just have to make a decision today to quickly do it, then I'm fine with that. But if there was a better day that would work better for the teachers.
I would assume that Tom thought of that when he.
Well, we did have those conversations with the association. Maybe it splits the distance between what will be their next work day on the 20th of April. It gives them 4 weeks of instruction essentially to prepare. They'll have a work day and then they'll have 4 more weeks.
Question answered. I'm good.
Okay.
Ready? Good. Ready for me to ask for a motion?
Sure.
Sure.
All right. Can I have a motion to change the 1920 calendar as indicated by Tom?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we'll do a roll call. Katie Frisch,
Aye.
Susan Marolt,
Aye.
Jonathan Nickel,
Yes.
Dwayne Romero,
Yes.
and Susie Zimmett.
Aye.
All right, motion passed.
Okay, we have consent action items. Can I have a motion to approve the consent action items as presented?
So moved.
Second. All right.
Okay. Katie Frisch,
Aye.
Susan Marolt,
Aye.
Jonathan Nickel,
Aye.
Dwayne Romero,
Aye.
and Susie Zimmett.
Aye.
All right, minute passed.
Hey, just a question. I don't know, but instead of having to go through everyone, can we just say all in favor aye, and if somebody's opposed, say no? No, is that not possible?
Angela used to say we couldn't, but Angela's not here anymore.
I am comfortable with that language if you want to move ahead with something similar.
Susan, do you have a reason that we can't do that?
No, that's fine.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Can save ourselves. 30 seconds.
There was something about having to call the names in alphabetical order too, for some reason, and I don't know when that applies. So we should probably just confirm that that is.
Yeah, we want to make sure our votes will count.
Yeah.
So we'll.
And it was at a CASB session that they mentioned that something about calling roll and doing it in alphabetical order and blah, blah, blah. So
Okay.
Eliza, maybe make sure that we're not messing up by doing it.
Okay, I'll take a look into that.
Yeah, we'll check on.
Or maybe for just critical items. I mean, like to approve the agenda, I think, maybe if it's a specific vote on something.
I think Katie's right. There is some level of materiality associated with the calling of the roll and getting the actual voice vote from each participant. And I think that's what Jonathan's referring to as well. I mean, simple stuff, approving an agenda, adjourning the meeting, stuff like that. We can get past all that crap.
Yep.
Okay, we're at future agenda items, and I have just noted a few things that we want to keep on our agenda going forward. One of which is the financial plan and the bond topic, and just keeping up with our financial update. So I think we should keep that on the agenda for each meeting going forward. Katie, you mentioned a robotics presentation. Do you think they want to do that at our next meeting?
Yes, they do. They were supposed to be on our agenda for this meeting, and they're still working. And they're also very disappointed they did not get to go to Worlds, but there are some other competitions they're preparing for. So they would like a few minutes to present, and I'm sure they'll be able to do it in this context.
And so should Eliza check with John Siebold?
Yeah.
Okay. Eliza, can we try to get the robotics team to present for us at our meeting on the 21st?
Sure, I'll reach out to John.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then we have just a couple of other things on our. We want to do some sort of a statement to the community or staff, and so I would like to try to get that done before our next meeting, and so maybe we can sort of try doing that. Just if somebody could draft a version, and then we can look over it. Anybody want to draft a version?
Jonathan, did you want to start on that?
I'll do it. Yeah.
You were suggesting it.
I love to feel myself. Not for lack of wanting to do it. I just like these days I feel like I live on video conference. I don't have a real life.
Yeah. All virtual.
Okay. Susan, I would just like to also add the superintendent transition plan probably is something we should start having visibility to and getting on our agenda.
That's a good point. And then Eliza, also, we should probably look at what we might have on our GP8E calendar just to see if there are things that we want to keep up with. And maybe Susie, you and Tom and Eliza and I can have an agenda planning meeting next week sometime.
Sounds good.
That'd work for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else about our next board meeting or future meeting agenda items? All right.
Did you include the debrief next time from the principals in our next meeting? And from Tom?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry, we should. We'll get a principal update on our online learning at that meeting as well. Yep. Thank you. All right, so we're at 10.1, debrief this meeting. Dwayne, you want to debrief real quick?
Sure, real quick. Debriefings are focused upon our GP2, our governance process 2, as well as a couple of pieces of our board superintendent relationship. It's not to critique each other on, grammar and expressions and whatnot. It's just a test and to measure and monitor our progress as a board in the context of good governance in a board meeting, but then also good relationship with the superintendent. So with that in mind, good meeting in terms of being mindful of the chair and allowing the topic to be presented and allowing sufficient depth to be developed that we can then respond to in a kind of a secret, kind of an organized manner. Susan, you're a good job in terms of reining in and continuing to provide control. I think at times you're going to probably have to kick us a little harder with a bit more of a steel toe, and I'm probably at the top of that list. So kick away. But that role is super helpful in order for us to stay on topic and on task. And you should not be afraid to kick on me and Jonathan in that order. And then, remember again, the relationship that we have with our superintendent. We're not, this is a good time for us to not only listen and get feedback, but to share and give direction to Tom and to really channel all of that energy through the position that he fills. And then, hold the Tom and others, the future superintendent to a good high standard in terms of effective communication and performance. Because we're all human and we're all kind of type A's who all want to try to solve the world's problems, and we wish to kind of reach through. But I think in order for the district to stay super effective and to allow the board to be super strategic, we need to really try to honor that BSR, relationship. And at the same time, I love what Katie said earlier, because there's a policy governance discussion with us in front of us. And at the same time, extraordinary conditions and situations sometimes require extraordinary leadership. And so we have to show a little bit of flexibility. And I think we're all of the same mindset there, trying to do our best to help, not to hinder, and rock on. There you go.
Yeah. And I like that, help rather than hinder. And if we can find ways to help, our students and our parents and our staff and each other, that's where we're going to make some progress in this situation. That's for sure.
Do we have an executive session?
We do. And so what I'm going to do is read that little thingy. All right. So now I would like to have a motion. So just logistically, we have Eliza sent us a link to get into the executive session Google Hangouts, and we'll just leave this one open, go to our executive session, and then come back and adjourn out of this one. Everybody clear on that procedure?
How does that work on a practical computer? So we'll all log out of this except for somebody and log into the other one?
I guess so. I don't know.
You'll want to mute your mics from this particular Hangout.
Good point.
And you might want to even close your video.
Do we have to vote before we close up?
Well, I'm gonna do a motion, but I just wanted to make sure we were clear on how to do it.
Okay.
Okay.
Clear?
Yeah.
All right. Can I have a motion to move into an executive session for CRS 24-6-402E for discussions determining positions relative to matters that may be subject to negotiation? Do you think it's this, or should we be doing personnel?
I thought it was personnel.
Personnel.
Okay, I could change that wording then.
I've got personnel here, so it's CRS 24-6-4024F. And so I'd like a person to go into executive session for that statute for personnel matters, please.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. I'm going to do the traditional roll call here. Katie Frisch.
Aye.
Susan Marolt.
Aye.
Jonathan Nickel.
Aye.
Dwayne Romero.
Aye.
And Susie Zimmett.
Aye.
So moved. So I will stay on this line and then rejoin you when you come back.
Okay. All right, everybody go to the other Google Hangout. That's easy to do. We'll see.
Yeah, we're in the. Yeah. Haven't seen her. Go ahead and turn off your camera and the other one, Susan. Your camera's still on.
Okay. It is 7:52 p.m. Do I have a motion to adjourn our meeting?
So moved. Second.
There you go.
All in favor?
Hey.
All
Yeah. All right.
I'll be over 5 minutes for sakes, Jonathan. Just kidding.
I'm in Willits. I'll be there in 30 minutes.
Thank you, everybody.
Hey, guys, thanks, everyone. Good meeting.
Have a great evening.